How to ruin your life in under a minute. The quickest self-sabotage I've ever seen. Boban Jankovic, who got frustrated at a foul in a basketball game, slammed his head into the pole, broke his neck, and never walked again. You can find the video online if you want to see, but that was real fast. Friend of mine was in college full-time, no job, lived in his parents' rental property, had a paid-off car, full scholarship, had some discretionary funds to himself, was wicked smart, got addicted to oxys, back when you could find real oxys, not Fent, drained his savings, got a DUI, stopped going to class, kicked out of his house and lived on my couch for a while. This all happened in probably 6 months or maybe a year. Got money from donating plasma to spend on oxys, pawned everything valuable he had, and one day he's seriously contemplating just ending things. And we talk for basically the whole day. Convinced him to go to rehab, his parents agreed to pay for it. He went to rehab in Florida, stayed clean afterwards, and changed universities to go out of state. I've never seen him since, but we still call and text occasionally. He's just defended his thesis for his PhD in biochemistry. He's a doctor now, and happily married as far as I know. So yeah, self-destruction followed by rebuilding. My mum's boyfriend after he attacked me because I refused to let him read my texts with my girlfriend after I was already living on my own, and I was just coming to pick some stuff up that I left behind. He ended up breaking my nose and arm and gave me a concussion. Now he's going to prison for 15 years. He even tried to tell the police when they arrested him that he was justified because he had felt that I disrespected him. I think the answer is opiates 100%. I've seen it happen to many friends and acquaintances, but one in particular stands out. They started eating perks, then oxys, graduated to snorting oxys, moved to snorting blow, all within the space of about 9 months. Kid went from being a typical teenager who took a bit too much Mary J to pawning off grandma's jewelry in less than a year. My husband's friend went down like that too. I'm not sure if he's clean, but I do know he just got out of prison for attempting to rob the bank that he uses. His father died when he was locked up. He didn't even know until 2 months later. My former mother-in-law had a warrant out for writing bad checks. It was a relatively minor thing. They came to get her and she ran, with her kids in the car, and led a police chase, and tried to run over one of the cops. She went from like a slap on the wrist to multiple felonies and years in prison. Pulling a knife on a cop wasn't a smart move. I knew a guy who got caught stealing beer and made this much worse by pulling out a knife. He was still arrested, but went to prison for a while and was now a felon. I feel like running is pretty stupid, but at least that way you possibly get away scot-free? I don't know why you'd think the knife would in any way make your long-term situation better. If you even get to have a long-term situation, people get blown away by the cops for doing much less than that. A friend of mine started motorcycling when he was 19. He died when he was 21. Nobody else was involved in the accident. Young and a bit reckless, but he was a smart and funny guy. Still think of him more than 20 years later. Yeah, I watched a friend of mine hit a telephone pole on a motorcycle and die instantly. He wasn't even going that fast, just hit it in the exact wrong way and broke his neck. He was engaged to be married. Just got a promotion at work and had a really good start going for his life before it tragically ended. He was even wearing literally every piece of safety gear he could. No stopping it if it's your time, I guess. The fire chief from a few towns away. Highly respected, grizzled veteran firefighter. He sent messages offering to do things to a younger person that he definitely should not have sent. The student reported him. Career over. Crystal. Had a friend that was just a normal guy living a normal life, and then 3 stints in rehab later, 2 of which I paid for, and he's divorced, can't see his kids, lost his job, and has done 2 bids in prison. Well, he had an affair with his cousin's wife. My best friend's wife cheated on him with his cousin. My best friend took many substances and didn't make it a couple of years ago. There were a few bits of false hope along the way, but he never got all the way over it. He'd get sober, do well for a while, and then one day he was just gone. I knew a girl who had dormant schizophrenia and didn't realize it until she dropped a tab of A and then just sort of never went back to normal. I always thought that was the sort of thing Dare made up, but apparently it can really happen when you already have a mental illness, but it hasn't yet reached its onset. This happened to my uncle. My dad and uncle were twins. Both joined the Merchant Navy together. Both of them took Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds during a trip to Asia, and my uncle never snapped back out again. My grandma had schizophrenia, so the chances are he already had it or he would have developed it, but after that trip, he never came back to the norm. She married a registered unspeakable act offender that was banned from seeing his own kids and eventually got her kids taken by CPS. My late brother-in-law discovered opioids. It cost him his marriage, his house, and his life in the space of about 2 years. Cranking their hog on a Zoom call to several hundred people. I was in high school during COVID and somebody took a dump with the camera on a live Zoom call. I mean, that's just efficient multitasking. Management material. Power move, to be honest. A friend of mine played college football and broke his leg. They gave him pain meds for it, and he never quit taking the pills. He started buying them off the street. He dropped out of college, lost about 120 pounds. I do not know where he is now. A coworker of mine became addicted to World of Warcraft and gradually lost interest in anything else. She was the executive assistant to the CFO of a major broadcasting company, and she stopped showering and wore her pajamas under her work clothes on the days that she did manage to show up. She was fired, lost her apartment, became completely isolated, moved into her parents' basement, and gained almost 100 pounds. Luckily, she was able to turn her life around, but it took years. Years. What is it about World of Warcraft? My ex had 2 co-workers, a couple, who ended up fired at the same time because they were hooked on it. They'd constantly be calling in because they'd been up all night playing and they were tired, or they wanted to stay home and game. I'm an avid gamer myself, but I've never in my life blown off my job to game. I'm glad I never got into WoW. Well, your goals in WoW are always clear, and with sufficient effort, achievable. If you screw up, it's not usually a big deal, you can come back later and try again. Generally, the challenges before you are appropriate to what your abilities can handle. You know what your abilities are, and there's a clear path to develop them. You can manage your social exposure to people, usually a common goal is clear and has a time frame, and there's very narrow and limited range of things people can do to mess with you. All of this is rarely true of real life. Speeding. He passed away at 17, a week after getting his license. Started doing white snow. Genuinely ruined their life within 2 years. We all managed it fine in college until he got started. We all graduated, and he went straight to rehab. A woman I know had an affair with her daughter's boyfriend. She lost absolutely everything. Her husband, daughter, career, and freedom. All for some lanky, scrawny dude. I have a friend from my college years who went down a terrible path. I hadn't seen him in like a decade by the time this went down, but he was a high school teacher with a master's degree. He started messaging someone who he was led to believe was a person of inappropriate age, but was in fact an undercover cop. It all started on a dating site and moved to text messages, with everything getting more raunchy as time went on. Finally, he managed to meet up with this person at a motel, only to find a bunch of cops waiting for him. Somehow he avoided prison, but I don't really have any details other than him not showing up on his state's offender registry or the state's inmate search. Last I heard, he's a bartender. All of those years of education and degrees are out the window. It was all over the news in his area and even showed up in news stories in my state, which is halfway across the country. Seeing his mugshot was quite the mind screw. I've never had anyone in my life fall so far or so fast. Friend. Started partying a lot and missing work. He lost his job at Meta. We found out through someone else because he pretended he was still working. He cashed out his 401k to keep up with his lifestyle. He was sharing a house with his sister. She moved out and he was struggling with rent. Got some guys to move in to pay rent, but he was pocketing the money. The guys eventually moved out. He now got some random girl who he's always fighting with, even got arrested recently for DV because they were fighting on the side of the road. We hardly see him anymore, and when we do, he's just drunk. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to Am I the Genius? Hey, how about that guy on Reddit who bought the giant wheel of cheese thinking he was going to sell it for profit, and it spiraled into him getting evicted? Well, the narrator of course had to go and track down this story for the video, and let me tell ya, it did not disappoint. Brace yourselves folks, because good lord, it starts off as seeming a bit silly, but like he might have a point, and then the update is just chef's kiss. It's a good demonstration of the term gambler's fallacy. He keeps falling deeper and deeper into spending money in the hopes of this eventually working out for him. So without further ado, here it is. Am I overreacting? My girlfriend left me over a cheese wheel. I, 27 male, and my girlfriend, 26 female, were saving for a house down payment. I work and she's unemployed. I've saved 32 grand and she saved 4 grand, so I feel like I bear the brunt of the financial decision-making here. I was doing the Oxford County Cheese Trail and found a vault release. They were selling a £140 wheel of 21-year-old cheddar. It was aged using a traditional cloth-bound method that's practically extinct here in Canada, and with over 21 years, it's extremely concentrated. 21-year-old cheddar often sells for $120 a pound. The farm was selling the entire wheel for £18,500. If I cut it into 200-gram wedges and sell it at $60 a wedge each, I could make 38 grand. So I bought the cheese wheel and brought it home in my truck. When I rolled it into her apartment, at first she was excited. When I started to explain the financials and investment potential, she turned sour. She didn't yell, but expressed she wasn't happy about how I spent my share of our house savings. She's now staying with her parents. I think she's overreacting because she doesn't understand the Canadian housing market. Our savings are not enough for a down payment without a ridiculous mortgage, and we need to take these opportunities. Am I overreacting? Or am I the only one with ambition in our relationship? In short, my girlfriend is staying with her parents because I spent my share of our savings on a cheese wheel, which can be cut into wedges and sold for a sizable profit. And here's the second part of the story. Update. My girlfriend left me over the 21-year-old cheese wheel. Now my landlord is trying to evict me for commercial activity. Am I overreacting? I've taken some of your feedback into consideration from my last post. For those curious, my girlfriend is no longer in the picture. She cracked due to low risk tolerance, so I've decided to go all in on the business. Oh no. I initially tried to return the wheel to the distributor to recoup some capital, thinking they'd have some pity. They were actually considering it until they came out to look at it in my truck. Apparently, the minor heat damage I caused to the paraffin wax while trying to open last week compromised the wheel, which was already non-refundable in the first place. Since I'm now stuck with a £140, 30 grand plus asset, I had to pivot to asset protection and keep what I still have. I went out and bought a true TB 2HC 59-inch solid door-back bar cooler, a professional digital temperature humidity controller, an industrial humidifier, a vacuum sealer, and ripening mats. Total cost was about 8.5 grand after taxes. Expensive, yes, but I wasn't going to let a 30 grand investment depreciate in value. The delivery was difficult. My apartment door is narrow, so I had to take the door entirely off the hinges and shimmy the cooler into the living room. I had maybe a millimeter of clearance between the frame and the unit. I was exhausted and excited, so I started researching installation on my phone before putting my front door back on. And that's when my landlord walked in. Apparently, he believes my door being off the hinges somehow removes my reasonable right to privacy. We already have a strained relationship because of my own use of the unit. He still holds a grudge because I was doing some light metal fabrication with a consumer plasma cutter in my kitchen a few months ago. My landlord saw the cooler, the vacuum sealer, and the wheel of heritage cheese and started moaning about commercial operations and fire hazards. I told him very clearly, the cheese is for personal consumption. There's nothing in my lease that limits how much dairy a tenant can own. The next morning, I found an eviction notice in my mailbox. It's riddled with spelling errors as if written in haste. I'm already preparing my defense for the landlord-tenant board. Am I overreacting? I'm being evicted over dietary preferences as far as the landlord is concerned, and I feel like this is an unlawful action. Also, please bear in mind that I've sold 0 cheese, so I feel like this is premature action. Hey, you know what you should do? Just start slicing and selling, and then come update us. I'd be surprised if he actually sold it. The fact that he thinks he can find 300 or more people willing to pay $60 for 200 grams of cheese in this economy is insane. And even then, the math doesn't add up. I believe that people will pay for this, just not from some guy. It would be from a reputable dealer. Like, even at a farmer's market, people tend to buy from people who made the cheese themselves, not just some weirdo reseller. Correct. I'd be worried about hygiene, how it was cut and with what, how it's been stored and packaged. I'm sure there'd even be regulations on how to sell this. It's impulsive. I won't speak details, but it's really sad how quickly bipolar disorder can mess up someone's life. going from great highs, even in a material sense, to deep, deep rock bottom lows in the course of a year. At my most manic depressed, I nearly lost my now wife. Between the depressive episodes where I was numb and hollow, and the manic episodes where I was reckless and impulsive, there was a window where I was impulsive and also craved dopamine. I nearly ruined my relationship, ended it myself as a break, and spent nearly a year working on my mental health and a lot of soul-searching before we got back together, and years later we got married and have a kid. A friend of mine growing up. He hung out with dealers. He didn't sell the stuff himself, but he was close to the traffic. One day, he was shot and died. Tragic bloody waste. Navy aviation electronics technician. He was great at his job and a hard charger. He started dating a woman who took her clothes off for money and discovered smack shortly thereafter. The cutoff threshold for that stuff in the Navy substance screening is 150 nanograms per milliliter. His result was 30,000. He had literally hit up on the way to work that morning. Addiction. For real. I struggle with it, and I look back at my life for the past 20 years, and despite being a functional addict, I just look at how much money, time, and expenses have been wasted because of the hard stuff. It just makes me so sad. That does seem to be the recurring answer here. There's a myriad of ways one can destroy one's life, but it seems like if you want a sure thing, look no further than smack or opiates, because we get a whole lot of stories about those things ruining everything, and very few about people coming back from them like this guy. Saw two guys fighting a bit outside a bar. Nothing serious, just grabbing and pushing. One guy walked away, and the other guy picked up a chair and threw it at him. The other guy fell in the road, got hit by a car, and died. 2 lives gone in like 5 seconds. Years ago, our kid's taekwondo instructor had it all. He ran the largest TKD gym in town, had over 100 students after school, parents on waiting lists to sign up their kids. He trained many gold medal winners in the under-16 category. Engaged to a beautiful lady who ran the business side. Thriving business. One night he got arrested in the area of town where the few working girls hung out. He was in his car and propositions an undercover female cop. A few days afterwards, before it was public, he had to call a parents' meeting and tell everyone what had happened. He said they made an error and he was just asking directions. But then he went and pled guilty. Slowly, at first, parents pulled their kids from his class. But by the end of week 2, the business had collapsed. No parent would trust him with their kids. Business gone, fiancé eventually walked too, reputation shattered. All because he wanted a little bit extra. Bicycle, no helmet. Simple, but effective. I wish more people understood this. It doesn't even have to be a gnarly fall to change your life forever. I knocked myself out cold one time even though I had a helmet on. I don't even want to know what would have happened if I hadn't had one. Alcohol. My friend's dad, who we'll call Jeff, never drank. Always gave me and his son crap for doing it. We were typical young 20-somethings going to the bar and parties on the weekends. At around age 50, Jeff lost his job, then he lost his dad. Really seemed to be as simple as him having a drink at the funeral and then something just flipped. He went from basically never drinking in his 50 years of existence to drinking a 1.75 of vodka a day. He quickly withered away and dropped down to 100 pounds. He had many episodes, going on multi-day benders of waking up, drinking until blacking out, passing out, and repeat for days on end. He got up in jail multiple times for DUI and domestics. Lived with my roommate and I for a while. We got him into treatment 5 times, all of which failed. He ended up dying of alcohol-related complications at age 57. In the 80s, while in college, I got a call for jury duty and was sitting by an acquaintance until they called for potential jurors to move to the back, and I found out that he was the defendant. Whoops! The guy had always been a good citizen until he acted on homosexual impulses from the local papers, became afraid that he was exposed to transmitted diseases during the scare in the 90s, and in his panic he used a firearm to rob a Pizza Hut to get money to pay for potential medical bills in the event that he got acquired immune deficiency syndrome. He didn't wear a mask, and until that happened, he had in fact worked at that particular Pizza Hut. The sad news is that at the time, there was so much stigma and fear and nowhere to get help. My wife got a speeding ticket and had expired tags. Didn't pay ticket, kept ignoring letters from court, driver's license expired and wasn't allowed to renew due to ignoring court notices. Health insurance her dad was paying for was cancelled by the insurers due to license status. Ran out of meds, got on Tinder, swiped right 300 plus times in less than a month, drank 24/7, had unprotected fun with something like 20 guys a month, then started disappearing for days, spending sometimes thousands of dollars a day on shopping, drinking, personal training, cabanas at health club, staying at hotels and buying clothes every day at Lululemon instead of doing laundry, buys 4 Louis Vuitton purses in a few weeks, steals our kids' college fund to go to Hawaii because a guy on Tinder might be going there, texts me from Hawaii saying she's almost out of money, sends pictures of her on the roof of a high-rise threatening to jump, somehow makes it back to our home airport, where I check her into a psych ward, blood alcohol content is over 0.30 after a 6-hour flight, 4 days in the psych ward, then she goes to rehab for 3 months, comes home, maintains sobriety for about a week, struggles for 2 years afterwards with sobriety and shame cycles, drinks herself to death at 42, leaving 12 and 9-year-old girls without a mother, leaves me with $120,000 in credit card debt. This all happens in about 2.5 years. Extreme weight loss, bipolar, and BPD were all factors. The kids and I are doing pretty well almost 7 years later. It felt like living in an episode of Intervention, as her crazy lived way faster than I could ever hope to react to it.
D&D players of Reddit, what is the most creative character you've seen someone play as? I once kidnapped a player character wizard and replaced them with a high-level illusion created by the BBEG. The player then had to control the illusion from the perspective of the BBEG. That's Big Bad Evil Guy, pretending to still be a member of the party. It was surprisingly effective. Just as they reached the BBEG, they were slowly realizing he wasn't helping much anymore. I played as a Wemmick back in college, and I loved that character. He was a druid, and thus could only carry wooden weapons. So, after thinking about it, I gave him a lance, and then proceeded to get every feat you could for a knight on horseback. Trample, charges, etc. I leveled like a monster class instead of a player class, aka slow as snails, but man, it was a hella fun character. He could do some insane damage by the end of the game, and if he had to get into close combat, he could do rake, bite for damage. My favorite part, though, were his 2 animal companions. The first was a weasel that took levels of thief. So it was our trap dismantler, and eventually had vorpal front teeth, so it had a devastating bite attack. The second was, and I'm not kidding, a giant white blood cell. It had been magicked out of a giant and made even larger, and it rode around on my druid's back. As the group's healer, it would blob onto them and heal them with a few levels of cleric. Mind you, my druid was teamed up with the lizardman barbarian, who was surprisingly smart, and the fey bard that would drink anything put in front of him, which is how he ended up as a half-elf woman of a different alignment by the end of the game. The Fae had a long-standing thing about drinking anything put in front of him. The campaign was heading to a big showdown between our ragtag group and what we thought was a terrible wizard. As it turned out, she was a high-level alchemist and had been using her potions to do much of her deeds. Unfortunately, when she was gone, all of her potions were sitting there, and the Fae decided, why not? Then panicked when he changed gender and drank something else, then another, and kept rolling hysterically on this table the DM had whipped up. A camel. Not just any camel, but a racing camel named Rocket Boots. We had a party member who was inconsistent about showing up for the games, and he showed up in the middle of a short campaign we were running after we had received a stolen racing camel. It's hard to say exactly what it was, but the guy went ham role-playing this camel, making camel noises and doing camel things. It was absolutely hilarious. I haven't done it yet, but I've always wanted to play as a true polymorphed chair. The chair was turned into a human, or any player race, and then started learning, maybe becoming a wizard himself. I don't know how anyone would ever know since the change becomes permanent, but if he ever walked through an anti-magic field, he would just turn back into a chair and be gone forever, and no one else would walk through there for fear of being turned into a chair. I played with a 100% randomly generated character. I had a decent combo of class and race, half-elf and ranger, but my stats were completely dysfunctional for a ranger. My worst stats by far were dex and wisdom. In fact, they were the worst in the group. I was the ranger that could do everything a ranger was not supposed to do, and nothing that a ranger was actually supposed to do. For one campaign, I played a gnome illusionist and put all the points into alchemy. With my starting gold, which the DM gave us way too much, and few limitations, I bought a riding dog, 2 saddlebags of holding, and then another for my own carrying. I spent the rest of my gold on all the mundane gear you could possibly imagine. I used a spreadsheet to track it because the DM was irritated. I had 3 years of food and water, 3 tents, 10 cots, a collapsible bathtub, gnome-sized, everyone else can bring their own, a collapsible chair and desk for scribing scrolls, a portable alchemist lab, all manner of rope, poles, tools, containers, and even a few weapons. I packed trail cakes, fine wine, and a few pounds of honey. I think the only other magic items I took besides the bag of holding was a firestone. Don't recall the exact name, but it produced a fire from small campfire up to huge bonfire and renewed the item after 8 hours or so. I wish that campaign had gone on longer. I really enjoyed pulling random stuff out of my bag and then making the DM refer to the printed copy I had handed him 2 weeks ago, showing that yes, I did in fact have half a pound of marbles. Well, at least you didn't lose them. Yeah, I gotta go. Bye-bye. My current campaign is made entirely from players who are new to D&D, myself included. So when building characters, my friend rolled mostly average stats, with the exception of intelligence, so he has a -3 in that. So we basically determined that he's illiterate. During our campaign, he also referred to the DM as God as a joke, and he kept asking questions like, "All right, God, what do we do about this?" So I made a joke that it looks like his character is actually communicating with God on a regular basis, but everyone around him just thinks he's insane and will never believe him. He then got the personality trait, Divine Guidance, which allows him to have a helpful hint once per campaign session. So canonically, his character can communicate with God, but to everyone else, he's just talking to himself as a result of his intellectual ineptitude. In plain English, a monk who fought everything by punching it repeatedly in the privates, Pathfinder monk with the maneuver master archetype who spammed dirty trick maneuvers. The look on the DM was priceless when they read the rules. Here's how it went. I tripped the tiger. Okay. Rolls the dice. Yep, the tiger's now prone. I elbow dropped the tiger in his fierce privates. Okay, so a regular unarmed strike. Oh, no. There are rules for that. No, there aren't. I beg to differ. The rules are this. You can attempt to hinder a foe in melee as a standard action. This maneuver covers any sort of situational attack that imposes a penalty on a foe for a short period of time. Examples include kicking sand into an opponent's face to blind him, pulling enemy's pants down to have his speed, or hitting a foe in a sensitive spot to make him sickened for a round. Huh. I guess you can punch the tiger in the privates. All the fights went from epic fantasy battles to this monk pocket sanding, private punching, and pantsing his way through every enemy. I don't know if there are any Joy Quest fans that are listeners to these kind of videos, but I was the dungeon master for Joy Quest, and I actually had a very similar situation to this. One of the players played literally as Jackie Chan, but he kind of named himself as like Jackie Chan. He actually had to fiddle around with this as well by implementing the way of the open hand in scenarios that weren't combat. So arm wrestling. So in one of the episodes, he actually tried to do like a bunch of different dexterity checks, and he tried to like slime and gum up his hands with a bunch of spit or some spilled ale, and basically try to cheat his way to the prize. Players. I've got a friend who is a weird character machine. Most recently is an orc named Sterog who believes that weapons are a coward's weapon, and beats people to their end with his shields. Before that was Robert the Destroyer, a barbarian who threw ladders at people. There was $3.50, or $3.50, to his friends, a really creepy monk who could shoot vines out of his hands like Spider-Man. Villigamish, a 5e warlock who halfway through a random goblin encounter realized he was terminating them for no reason and became a staunch defender of goblin rights. Harold the Great and Powerful was a bard who was absolutely useless, but invested everything in bluff and insisted he was a high-level wizard. Also had a penchant for buying people's souls and then pushing them towards positions of power. The Bear Witch Project, aka BWIP, or Bruce Berner, was a lycanthrope witch that spent most of his time in half-bear form. When asked what his gut feelings were on a topic, he responded with, "I have many feelings on guts." And of course, Justin Chandler, a shaman who saved literally all his gold till level 7, then used it to permanently enlarge and awaken his pet frog and deck it out with sweet gear. A player made a dwarf who was actually a very small human raised by dwarves. He was a barbarian and was modeled after Macho Man Randy Savage. He had a pet Wolverine, which he would throw at people screaming, "The fastball special!" The Wolverine didn't last too long. Randy, throughout the campaign, slowly went insane due to his fear of magic. Randy then began cutting people's hands off for no apparent reason, and the legend of Macho Man ended when he attempted to suplex a dragon. Suplexing a dragon. I mean, this sounds like an epic tale if you think about it. Just like this little man's like walking up this huge, like ancient dragon, just, "Mere mortals, they feared me for thousands of years. What will you do?" "I'll do like I always do. I'm gonna go in for that suplex. You need yourself a Slim Jim." And then unfortunately is crushed. Wow, what a tale. It's been a long time, but as I remember it, my buddy was using Middle-earth as the setting. My character was an elf with polymorph abilities, hung out in Mirkwood, and while transformed as various woodland creatures, spied on passerby on behalf of Gladriel. Spending 100+ years in Mirkwood changed her into something a bit more enty. Not physically, just personality. Lazy. Likes to talk about trees. At this point, I wasn't tainted with min-maxing or metagaming, so I was more than content to make this weird, awesome elven forest woman with no social or combat skills and send her into an adventure based on subterfuge, navigating deserts, and combat. I was also interested in making an elven woman who wasn't the Tolkien archetype. More awkward, homely, blunt, super into trees and tree stuff, and not the usual, "let's make dope skyscrapers out of these redwoods" way, but more like, "let me tell you which tree sap tastes best right off the bark." So she ended up being whisked away, reassigned to an adventure in the east past Mordor, in a desert where, according to the DM, Tolkien's mentioned in only one paragraph, blue wizards were hiding. She was very upset with her reassignment. Over the course of the adventure, because wizards, she got stuck as a parrot, rode another character's shoulders. Perfect disguise. Lots of scouting, lots of complaining about not being in Mirkwood, and also being a parrot. Many Mirkwood facts, Mirkwood reminiscences, drawing maps of Mirkwood in the sand with a talon. The entire time, I had her advising the party that returning to Mirkwood would be the best option. That said, when the enemy least expected it, BAM! Sleep mist and trash talk punctuated with WALKS! Surprisingly effective. We never finished the campaign, so I like to imagine she just abandoned them at some point, and there's a colorful parrot flying happily around Mirkwood, perching on a character who's actually from Mirkwood, not Treebeard, who I've been reminded is from Fangorn. See, all I know is Mirkwood squawk, nothing else. It was fun to think about this again after all this time. Now I'm probably going to remake her as an important NPC in my new wilderness adventure-based campaign. I don't know why, but for some reason when I imagine this, like, very chill elven woman who's just so attached to the forest, whenever she's, like, in, like, this parrot form, I just picture Iago. So, like, can you imagine, like, that change between just, like, "Hello, I am an old elven woman, here to guide you on your path back to Mirkwood to, hey, you know what? I don't like being a parrot. This is ridiculous. Hey, let's go back to Mirkwood and check out the tree bark, huh? Rah! I once played a game where the players did not know any of their stats. Everything was run by descriptions like, "you're really good at getting into places that you shouldn't," picklock skill, or "you're bleeding from several wounds and are nearly at death's door." If it were that kind of game, the players wouldn't necessarily know where they were. By the way, it was the best campaign I'd ever been a part of. The GM was a freaking genius. We were in the Marines together, and he got orders to go to Korea. When he came back, he no longer played and wouldn't associate with us nerds anymore. Dude was a natural, and I never found out just what happened. All I know is he didn't find religion, as suggested. I think he was met with anti-nerd peer pressure, which is funny because the nerds were also Marines, so there it is. A thief with one level of illusionist that passed himself off as an arch-wizard, throwing fireballs and screaming, "These beasts are immune to magic, woo!" in a fight, which was a funny experience. He was good at scamming NPCs, though. My character is similar to that, a thief that pretends that what he does is all magic. We were supposed to be infiltrating a cult that was gathering a presence in this town. The other people in my party joined the guard, and I was going to investigate the city's criminal underworld. And then I got distracted and ended up convincing a bunch of people of my magical power and how I can make them as good as me. So I became the kingpin of the criminal element in the city. It ended up not helping us find the cultists at all. But when we found them, I had an army. A necromancer who thought they were a cleric. Only the player and DM knew and had a list translating what the player said they were doing and what they were actually doing, i.e. spells, daily prep, so the others wouldn't catch on out of character. In his formative years, he came upon a book of forbidden spells. Being young and stupid, he assumed it was a book of divine rituals. Fast forward several years, and he wanders the land preaching about the everlasting life. He's skilled in first aid and potions because not every scrape requires divine intervention, but has some spells that will bring someone back from the brink of death. He also has a bodyguard who wears full plate armor, who follows him around because he owes a life debt. Doesn't talk much, though. The other players never discussed removing their own armor, or eating, or using the bathroom, so nobody found it odd that the NPC never did. The other players also never took points in Knowledge Arcane to discover the spell effects that didn't match what they should. Unfortunately, he got found out when one of the party members went down, and he turned them into a zombie. The players were then in on the joke and weren't able to separate what they knew and what their characters knew, which is why they weren't told from the start. If the party member hadn't gone down, there was a plan to have a personal quest, in a trial of faith style, to see if he could unintentionally turn himself into a lich, and if the party would help him do so. Mimic companions are what made me fall in love with the concept of tabletops and random chance. Just messing around with a friend of mine, he happened upon a mimic, fed it a live fairy that was annoying him, and it became his friend for life. That mimic NPC rolled natural 20s like it was his freaking job, and honestly, single-handedly carried the party, with a bit of help from a sentient severed goblin hand, for the rest of the series. All the players had terrible rolls for hours, and just sat in wonder while Mimic and Handy wrecked a Lich Dragon. All hail the mighty luggage. There was a campaign where the party came across a magical cauldron filled with boiling gold. They were told they could drop an item in, and it would be turned to gold while retaining all of its other properties and be imbued with intelligence. They were warned that the said intelligence might be malevolent. While the party debated what to drop in, the gnome rogue jumps in. He became gold-coated, which increased his armor class significantly, but also became cursed with an evil alter ego. There was much rolling to determine when and for how long he was forced to play as chaotic evil. I played a human fighter. He was a carpenter, had a wife and children. He was a really kind man, so kind in fact, he didn't carry a weapon. He was non-violent. His flaw, however, was that he had a massive malignant brain tumor pressing on his amygdala. Since they didn't have CAT scans in this universe, no one knew that he had inoperable brain cancer. Whenever our party was in a situation that caused great stress, like combat for example, my character would slip into a sort of trance and go on a rampage in the battlefield. He was absolutely stacked in combat, so he would absolutely clean the hell up when it hit the fan. The gentle carpenter would turn into a snarling, mumbling maniac who royally crapped on anyone who dared oppose him. He would come out of the trance with no memory of the fighting. Since he didn't carry a weapon, this required some creativity, so I made my character a master of improvised weaponry. Before combat, I would ask the DM if there was anything in the room I could lift above my head. Whatever was nearest is what I used as a weapon. Chair, stones, dead enemy's femur, you name it. My character was a whirlwind of bottles, debris, and the occasional small animal. A true force to be reckoned with. His name was Buin the Machine Rodriguez. Buin? I mean, I'm still invested. This is a very cool character concept. Kind of like a Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde scenario, but like with like actual medical knowledge behind it. But the name Buin throws me off. Is that like a short term for like brain, I guess? But I just can't help to be like, my name is Buin the Machine Rodriguez. So, you want me to use my fists, huh?
Students of Reddit, what's the story of the worst teacher you ever had? Had a science teacher that insisted cells were not made of atoms, and that therefore either leaves weren't alive or diamonds were. When I was at primary school, for ages I think around 7 or 8 till 11 in the UK, we had a class on human reproduction education. A kid asked the teacher about female eggs and how that works, only for her to scream at him that women do not have eggs and not to be stupid. Screw you, Brighton Junior School. This was about my class in the 9th grade. We were about 15 or 16 then. We had chemistry and we were learning about atoms and molecules. Almost everyone in class thought there was a molecule for everything, like a strawberry molecule for example. Then when I pointed out that they must have misunderstood it all, they acted like I was dumb or something. Look at stupid Brenda over here doesn't understand that there's a strawberry molecule. I had a math teacher who would leave the class to ask another teacher how to do certain math problems. Sometimes he'd be gone as long as 30 minutes during a 50-minute class period. Suffice to say, no one in that class learned much math. If it makes you feel any better, the teacher probably was given the class against his wishes. Math classes are often very hard to fill, particularly since they are a challenging set of skills for not much pay, compared to other opportunities. As such, schools sometimes ask unqualified people to teach math class because they need someone. I can confirm, I was supposed to teach math one year, and the school called me on a Friday before school started and informed me that they needed me to teach science instead, and if I could please come in over the weekend to set up my lab. Do you know how much prep should go into a successful year of science? You basically should set up your curriculum in advance, plan out all the lab exercises, lobby your school for the money, and order all the supplies. You can't just walk in and wing a year of science with 130 kids when you've never taught the subject before. As you can tell, I'm not bitter at all. All of these stories remind me of how bad substitute teachers are. Like, I think my old high school just got random people off the streets to teach. I once had a sub who wore doctor's hairnets over his shoes and asked me what I wanted to be in life. When I said I wanted to make films, he laughed in my face and said that's not happening. Education is a joke in the States. My English lit professor was late to class every day. She was clearly on substances. On top of that, she didn't even shower. Her hair was matted, and she was so rude. She gave us homework and never took it up or graded it, and then would show up and say it's test day with no warning. I had to drop the class after I failed the first test. I believe most of the class dropped after that exam as well, and she didn't come back next semester. I mean, if she was on substances, then clearly the English class was pretty lit. One time while taking an exam in my Calculus 2 class, I got a random bloody nose that dripped right onto the test. After explaining what happened, my teacher said if I leave the room to go clean up, I wouldn't be able to retake the test. My options were to grab another test and start over halfway through without being able to copy my previous answers, or leave and fail the exam. I walked out of the classroom and withdrew before I even got to my car. You should have bled all over the test and handed it in. And with that evidence, if they kept it, went to the dean or someone else in administration. I have steady nosebleeds of up to a minute every now and then, and that's while lying down. I honestly couldn't take the chance of continuing to write while I bled for just a gotcha moment with a jerk teacher. FYI, as a nosebleeder myself, don't lay down when you got one. In case you didn't know, tilting your head back is also a lie. Both things just make it worse. This is about my Welsh professor. She assigned textbooks that were out of print, couldn't explain anything to save her life, responded to questions by repeating herself, and her syllabus was just header info and a single line that said, "The purpose of this class is to learn Welsh." In the 2nd grade, had a cool girl named Deja in my class. Our class made a joke where we'd say Deja and then boo in a loud and deep voice. The teacher was super ticked off and took Deja's bag, the rectangular one with the 2 metal bars on the back, and slammed it against her back. I heard the most blood-curdling scream of all time, and the whole class just fell silent. I don't know what happened to the teacher since that was near the end of the year and I moved away after that school year ended, for unrelated purposes. The teacher physically assaulted Deja because y'all made a joke about her name? Holy freak. Yeah, I felt so bad for Deja and the memory keeps coming back to me sometimes. I don't know why I think about it, I just do. Hearing that story made me really think that I probably would have taken part in that joke, because saying deja vu sounds kinda cool. But I could see how it would suck if you didn't like the joke. I was once humiliated by my teacher because the guy I had a crush on was in another class came into our classroom to ask my teacher something. A lot of my classmates started giggling and one of them called my name for several desks away, as if I possibly didn't notice that my crush had entered the room. I was the one that ended up getting in trouble and the teacher threatened to send me into my crush's class and have everyone laugh at me, even though I hadn't said or done anything besides go bright red. My bad for having friends who knew I liked a boy, I guess. Not saying what happened was right, but I'm embarrassed as freak by everyone's behavior. I wouldn't wish any aspect of this situation on anybody, but God, that teacher hated me. This was a gym teacher. The other kids would often bully me and sometimes beat me up. She would only intervene if I fought back, and that was to punish me and me alone. I went to the guidance counselor one time after getting kicked out and told him what happened. He called her and she said I was the one attacking them and they did nothing, since she was the teacher and I was the student. You can guess who the guidance counselor believed. This was my entire elementary school life. I could have 6 jerks pushing me around, calling me names, hitting me, trying to pants me, etc. That's all fine. Throw one punch and break their nose, detention for a week. Literally had the exact same thing happen to me as well. I would get ISS, in-school suspension, and the other girl would get nothing. I am also a girl, but I was a very tall 12-year-old. So whenever I would fight back, they would assume I caused more damage, even though I was the one being picked on and did not start the fight and was only defending myself. Years later, my mom said they wanted to permanently suspend me, but she threatened to sue them since they admitted to her that I was the one being bullied and couldn't do anything about it in writing. Good thing though is the ISS teacher was very nice to me and would let me do whatever I wanted as long as I did all my homework and stayed quiet. Got a lot of good quality reading done. I had the opposite effect with teachers in school. Every time I was about to get into a fight, one magically appeared. I remembered one time I was in gym and this kid was walking up to me ready to fight me and my math teacher showed up out of nowhere and stopped us. It's like she had instant transmission. A teacher once told me that sand was a liquid because you could pour it. I then raised my hand and told her that if you had enough big containers, you could pour bowling balls. The class laughed and about 10 minutes later I sneezed. She thought I said BS and sent me to the principal's office. The worst teacher I ever had was my shop/gym teacher in high school. He would not do anything at all. I was able to smoke in shop class and in gym as long as I was outside running laps or something. I never once heard him tell anyone about safety measures when using shop equipment. A few people got hurt and one actually lost half a thumb, but the worst thing he ever did was hire some of the grade 9 and grade 10 girls to babysit for him and his wife. He would leave his wife at the bar and go home to check on the kids, and was eventually caught hooking up with one of them. After a police investigation, they found a ton of homemade content on his laptop of him hooking up with these girls. Last I heard, he went to jail for life. This was all in a town of less than 300 people. Similar thing happened to a hall monitor I knew. Dude went on to be a coach at another school and was apparently doing pretty well. Threw it all away because he started to date a student. What an idiot. In the 5th grade, I had a teacher who disliked me because I was bullied a lot and she had to take care of it and talk to my parents a lot. One day I was playing kickball and got borderline assaulted by some kids, and she saw, came over, and let them go inside. She looked at me covered in dirt and said, "Don't go telling your dad about this." Next day, my dad went into the school and had a very long talk with this teacher and the principal. I'm pretty sure she was hoping the school year would end sooner. Damn, I had the same teacher in the same grade who would never stop screaming at one student named Nate. I ended up kind of becoming friends with him, but didn't see him much after 7th grade. It got to the point where it seemed like she would go out of her way to find some reason to scream at him. She even screamed at him when some student smuggled a staple gun into the lunchroom and began firing it at Nate, claiming he was doing horseplay or something. The kid with the staple gun got away scot-free. Same kid also hit me with the rubber band next year until I almost cursed. Luckily, my teacher was really friendly and said, "Well, I would have too. That really hurts." I had a computer science teacher who didn't really teach the class. First day of school, he stood up and said, "I'm going to be honest with you guys. We're going to be learning this material together." He then pushed us all into online code camps. The beginning of every class, he also spent about the first 20 minutes going over anything under the sun except for programming. If your phone went off at any point during class, he said that you had to buy the entire class donuts, but he was exempt from this rule. My programming teacher also had similar teaching strategies. The first day he said, "You guys will just be learning on codes and I'm gonna monitor you." He then proceeded to play the Winnie the Pooh baseball video game every class, even promising kids A's if they could beat it on the hardest difficulty, as the rest of us struggled to actually program. First off, where can I play Winnie the Pooh baseball, because I always hear about that game? And secondly, my economics teacher in college had the same rule about donuts. His phone actually went off once and the whole class was like, "Ooh," and he bought us donuts the next class. It was awesome. Some crazy substitute we had for geography hit the computer monitor to the floor because of a fly. It landed beside me and I nudged it off with my paper. My elbow knocked the dictionary off the table and I was, and I quote, "isolated from class for throwing a dictionary across the room." I was pissed off. When I was in kindergarten, my first teacher got pregnant, so she had to take maternity leave. She then got replaced with a substitute teacher to teach my class for the rest of the school year. She was very strict and she was not very nice. I had issues with her, but I was a very good student, quiet and to myself. One day I asked her that I had to use the bathroom, but she refused to let me go. I really had to go, but ended up peeing myself. I remember going to the nurse and they called my mom. My mom went to the school and had a meeting with the teacher, the principal, and someone else. 2 days later, that teacher was fired. At least she didn't do the, "I don't know, can you?" bit when you asked to go to the bathroom. Every time a teacher did that, I wish I peed myself. I remember my 4th grade teacher, Mrs. Doge, being super strict. She was pregnant and took maternity leave. The substitute was the nicest teacher ever, and she was appalled that Mrs. Doge had never read us a single book. When I was in the 9th grade, the school I went to could not afford enough books for everyone in the English classes to have a copy to take home. They only had like 30 copies and they had like 4 classes of 25 students. So what they did was have us read in class. But rather than have each of us read to ourselves, the teacher read to us. I think this was because they wanted the entire class to be at the same place in the book. This was the 9th grade. It was a little insulting, in my opinion, to have the teacher read to us. The teacher quickly realized that it's no fun reading the same chapter to 25 students 4 times a day. So she brought a tape recorder and would record herself reading to the first class. The 3 other classes got to sit there and listen to the recording of her reading the chapter while she sat at her desk doing God knows what. I've never been one of those who liked wasting time, so I went to the library and checked out a copy of whatever book we were reading and would read it at home. I would finish it in a couple of nights, whereas it would take a week or more to have it read to us in class. The English class was my second to last class of the day, so I would use that time to do homework from my other classes that day. Ideally, not to have any work to do after school. An English teacher I had in high school asked the class to spend half of the class in the library, finding a love poem. I chose Sonnet 130 by Shakespeare. It's not your standard love poem. It says nothing nice about the lady until the very end. She failed me on the project. The very next project was to choose a poem that described our general feelings around the time. I chose a poem from the existentialists. I don't recall exactly which one, but it was about bad thoughts, if you catch my drift. Again, I failed the project. I never forgot her response after I read it aloud. "Why would you choose something so awful and sad?" A girl in the class said, "Maybe that's how he feels." She sent me to the principal's office for punishment. By the end of that year, I was in the mental hospital for acting on those bad thoughts. I was there for 3 months. I feel bad for the OP in this story. I had an English teacher that failed me because I used the words explosions in the sky for a poem, and she told me I plagiarized because that was the name of a band. My next poem was about how my English teacher sucked, and I got a passing grade. I was so confused. In middle school, I'm in college now, I had the displeasure of experiencing a married math/humanities teacher duo who were horrible people and took their relationship issues out on their students. The math teacher was just extremely freaking weird and would go on strange rants, scream, and clip her toenails in class, and clip her nails in class. This happened during a test once. The only sound that could be heard was pencil scratching and the clipping of her nails. I still remember it and shudder. She also made up ridiculously hard to follow technical rules about formatting that would ruin your grade and even put you in detention if you didn't follow them correctly, like drawing the exact margins on homework, boxing answers, and getting all of your work signed by a parent. I was a good kid, but went to detention for the first time that year. Eventually, half the class was in and out of detention every week. Worst of all, she seemed to single out her students to torment at random. I, a small, shy, emo Hispanic girl, was her favorite target. I remember her once yelling at me in class to the point of making me cry for fidgeting with my eraser. She described it as playing with dirt. She brought it up relentlessly in class for a month, calling me dirty in front of my classmates. The worst thing is that when she saw my friend eating a cookie in the hall, for some reason, she absolutely flipped her lid and tried to force her to spit the cookie into her hand because eating in the hall was not allowed, a rule that was never enforced. My friend apologized but naturally refused, swallowing the cookie that was already in her mouth, and thought that was that. The teacher continued to scream at her, got her detention, and tried to get her suspended. Her husband was the humanities teacher. Think history, current events, and social studies. He was, to put it lightly, a blatant racist. When we talked about the Holocaust or the slave trade, he would ham-fistedly point out the Jewish or black kids in the class and basically be like, "Just like your ancestors," and keep bringing up the kids as examples despite clearly making them uncomfortable. This wasn't even the most blatantly offensive part. During parent-teacher conferences, he literally told my mom, an immigrant, and myself to our faces that I was late and often valued socialization over hard work because I was a Latina. He said something along the lines of, "Just because it's okay in your culture doesn't make it okay here. I taught in Costa Rica once. I should know." I was a meticulous worker who would chat with friends here and there, but not excessively, which of course wasn't the most messed up part about his statement. Me and my mother were speechless, and she didn't say anything, but there was tears in her eyes, and she was understandably mortified and angry. His words hurt me, but it hurt most of all to see her like that and feel so helpless. They both continuously berated me in class and gave me unreasonably bad grades. I was a quiet, extremely shy, hardworking kid, known for being a bit of a goody two-shoes. Before their classes, I never had any academic difficulty, and humanities was my favorite subject. After a while, I shrunk completely. I stopped trying in both of their classes. I was so ashamed, frustrated, and scared of them. My already low self-esteem dropped considerably, and my anxiety in the class situations worsened. Although I consider myself to be quite intelligent and was able to still get A's after their classes, all throughout high school, I retained any aversion to speaking to my teachers and contributing in class, causing my academic life to suffer quite a bit. So Mr. and Mrs. Penn, F you, and I'm glad you got fired and divorced. I hated teachers like this, and being a kid who spoke up, I often got in trouble. I once told my film teacher that he was ruining people's projects with his input. For example, one kid had this dramatic film that was supposed to end with a murder scene. Our teacher thought it would be better if the guy was tied up and had syrup poured on him. It was the stupidest idea ever. Oh, and he loved adding fart jokes to everything. My second grade teacher was Sister Bridget. She didn't like me at all. One day I was feeling ill, and I asked to use the restroom. She told me I was lying, as she tried to tell me why I was a liar, which led me to vomit all over her shoes. Maybe it was a holy vomit. Okay, maybe not the worst teacher, but definitely the strangest. Mr. Pratt. He was a substitute teacher I had in high school in the 90s. Inner city school, he was an older black dude with a loud mouth. There were a lot of jerk students though, who always mouthed back to every teacher, which made learning difficult. Mr. Pratt had an odd choice when responding to these kids. Imagine a well-dressed but definitely urban-sounding substitute who, when a student tried to act out, would pull out a freaking puppet, obviously custom-made and looked just like him, suit and all, out of his desk. He would then start berating the student via the puppet. The puppet was called Pratt Daddy, by the way. He would make the student talk to the puppet and apologize. Most didn't. They were laughing and tried to talk over Pratt Daddy, in which case Pratt Daddy, the puppet, would kick them out of class and lock the door. Then the puppet went back into the desk drawer and Mr. Pratt continued his lessons. It was odd. I feel like that is something you would have seen on a sitcom. But Pratt Daddy would have probably hit the students with a stick. My former tutor for year 9, also the art teacher, she refused to take action when somebody created a Snapchat account under my name and sent unclothed images to dozens of people around my school. Shortly after this, I got into a fight because a guy was still pissed about the Snapchat situation and punched me in the jaw when I had a retainer. From this, she decided to secretly send loads of emails to my mother suggesting that I, more than likely, have autism. I have since basically been forced into getting checked up on, only for doctors to confirm that I don't have enough symptoms for a diagnosis. She treated me really poorly in the art lessons and did very little to get involved with me when I reported or got witness being bullied.
Teachers of Reddit, what is your "this student is so smart it's scary" story? One of my kindergartners just knows multiplication, and not just the basics 5s or 10s. In the beginning, when his parents told me, I played along with 2 times 2 or 10 times 10. But you can tell him 17 times 14, and he knows it instantly. So cool to watch. I was doing a 500-piece puzzle with some kids. I was a preschool teacher. We finished the puzzle except for one piece, which was nowhere to be found. Kid comes in, takes one look at the puzzle on the table and says, "Oh, you're missing that? I know where it is." Reaches into a completely different 500-piece puzzle, rummages for like 10 seconds, pulls the piece out, and fits it in. I asked him how he knew it was there. He said he had done the other puzzle for a bit and noticed it. I asked him how long ago. Christmas, he says. It was February at the time. The kid was maybe 5. Might be more memory than intelligence, but that was crazy to see. Such a great kid in somewhat dire circumstance. I hope he's gotten all the opportunities he deserved. I work with 18 to 24-month-olds, and we have an 18-month-old who can have literal conversations. Perfect sentence structures, perfect verb conjunction, perfect pronunciation, even L and R. Knows all the alphabets, numbers, colors, shapes by sight. Some of the others know some of those things, but I've never seen a baby this advanced. I sometimes forget she's only 1 year old because she seems more like 3.5. Just tiny like a 1-year-old. Her dad brought her back from a well baby checkup telling us that the doctor asked, "Does she say any words yet?" And we all lulled because she has full conversations. We had a 4-year-old in preschool. He was sitting under the table writing down numbers for a long time. He had no time to talk to us. When he came out and we looked at what he'd been doing, he said he wrote down all the multiplications. It turns out his brother in 5th grade was learning the multiplication table, and this little brother really wanted to do the same, but didn't have a multiplication table. He counted on his fingers to add each column and got the table right. A few days later, he knew multiplication. He would also comment on dates. If someone said that they had a birthday on June 12th, he would say, "Oh, that's in 184 days." Almost immediately. On an excursion, we passed some statues with birth and death dates, and he would casually sum up. He was 78 years and 110 days old. She was born 33 years and 120 days before him, etc. I think he was more focused and willing to understand than necessarily so smart. I don't know about that last comment. That kid sounds pretty frickin' smart to me. I taught high school math. One of my freshman students divided 1,134 by 63 in his head in less than a second. I let him finish the problem, and then after he arrived at his answer, I asked him, "How did you do that?" He looked at me with this blank stare as if he was thinking, "You can't do that?" He proceeded to say, well, I doubled 63 and then multiplied that by 10, and then I saw that 1,134 was just the difference of those two numbers, so 18. And looked at me like it was nothing. I told him good work and moved on. I'm only above average at a few things, but one of them is mental math. When I saw that this kid could do this calculation that I couldn't, I was so happy. It was one of my happiest moments as a teacher. I didn't help him in that moment, but to know I played a small part in his math education felt so good. I have a 5-year-old this year who has stolen my wallet more times than I'd like to admit, from my pocket, without me knowing. I now wear a wallet chain like I don't remember what decade it is. He still tries, but he hasn't figured out a workaround. Yet. Feel like this kid may be more street smart. I'm a piano teacher on the side. I'm currently teaching a 4-year-old how to read sheet music before she can read books. I ask her to find the C's and she'll point them out on the page and things like that. She can also do math really well and understands the concept of multiplication. Also, another student that just started and plays by ear and composes her own pieces at 8. She also speaks 5 languages, which I didn't find out until I told her I was learning German. After teaching her for 3 months, she's already to the point where I had to send her to a better teacher. My mom was a student teacher in the early 1970s. She recounts the story of a gifted first grader that nobody really knew how to handle. Every day, her mentor would give the child a copy of the New York Times and let him read during her class. Much later, my mom was working as a speech therapist and had a severely autistic child that would come in daily. After their lessons, he would spend his free time drawing elaborate and accurate city maps on the whiteboard. It was fascinating. I worked at a special purpose preschool designed for kids on the autism spectrum. Did an intake day with a kiddo, 4 years old, where I was just trying to have fun and see what kind of things he liked. We did some time on the computer where we surfed around YouTube a bit, and he searched up a video about our solar system and began to explain to me the difference between the inner solar system and the outer solar system. What they're made of, sizes, electromagnetic fields to compensate for distance from the sun, etc. I had to Google everything he was saying because I had no idea if it was true. Spoiler alert, it was. This story in particular, I feel, is one of those things where if a kid focuses on one thing they really love, they will know everything about that one thing. Their mind is like a sponge and they will absorb all the information about that thing that they love. For us as adults, we might have known this stuff a long time ago or maybe never learned it, but trying to absorb it now, especially with moderate interest, is very difficult. Not a teacher, but had a classmate who was and still is a genius. I distinctly remember him asking very complex questions on the current reading literature and making constructive arguments. It was over my head, but our teacher was offended and argued back that he didn't understand anything. I think they were well over her head as well. She screamed at him and stormed out of the class a number of times. There was a time she asked him to leave as well. I never felt so bad for a classmate. He didn't deserve to be yelled at like that. I believe he's now a mathematician with published works and awards as well as a successful musician. I have a student who's an immigrant that speaks fluent English. I assume that she grew up in the USA, but she told me that she'd only been here for a year and knew zero English before coming. I was amazed. I have another student who just does calculations instantly in his head. He doesn't even have to think. When he learns more math, it just comes automatic. He explained that numbers just make sense. I teach kids with autism that learn on the alternate curriculum, usually lower level academics, and have cognitive delays. I'm always amazed that while they might struggle in one area, they're very strong in another. I had one girl who knew everyone's birthday, everyone she met, day, month, year, and age. She could also do crazy math in her head. I have another kid who's minimally verbal but knows every locker combination in the school. 2 others who are amazing artists. Another who could tell you what 80s movie icon shared a birthday with you. I love my kids. A kid's work kept deleting itself on a computer every few minutes. He was having a meltdown and I saw it happen. It was impossible to explain the phantom deleting that was going on. Fast forward to the end of class and there's one kid remaining that was sitting at the opposite computer from the kid who lost all his work. He looks at me and says, "You want to know how I did it, sir?" He had put a USB keyboard into the back of the computer and had it set up so he could hit the delete key with his big toe. It was the funniest stealth attack I'd seen in a long time. Being the teacher, I should have done something, but it was too funny and smart. I don't know, it sounds like this kid might be the smartest one yet. I had a first grader with a speech impediment who was asking for a type of book. His peers and I couldn't understand him no matter how hard we tried. Finally, he gave up, and without any frustration, he found a picture book with someone stirring a pot on the cover. He opened the book and skimmed through words until he found what he was looking for, the word cooking. He showed me the book and pointed, telling me that was the word he'd been trying to say. He wanted a cookbook. This was a 6-year-old. My mom had a special needs student who went on some field trip to one of the NASA centers. I don't remember where. His dad was an IT guy, I think, and had been teaching this kid, around 10 years old, stuff on the side because he was all about computers. The kid wandered off and apparently found some office or computer lab or something unlocked. Walked in, sat down at a computer, figured out how to unlock that terminal, and started browsing through their internal stuff for a while before someone caught him. He got in big trouble for that one, but I don't know if it even registered in his mind what a huge issue that could be. He would do it at school and nobody cared too much, so I don't think he saw an issue doing it out in the real world. He came to my mom the next year or the year after that when his family moved. And my mom was warned not to leave her personal electronics unattended because he would figure out how to get in. I had a student maybe 5 or 6 years ago. I teach social studies, so didn't come in direct contact with her areas she was truly special. But anyway, she could speak 5 languages pretty fluently. English is her native, and she learned French in middle school, taught herself Russian and Italian for the sake of reading, and learned Indonesian from being around kids in the school and wanting to pick it up. She could write music just from hearing it and then reproduce it in essentially no time. I don't know if this is common or not, but it absolutely shocked me. She's bar none the best student I've seen as a teacher with regards to conveying herself through written work. She graduated just a few weeks after turning 16. One of those kids who effortlessly glides to the top of her class. Last I heard, she was about to graduate in something related to archaeology. I was a student teacher at the time, completing my education degree. I taught 8th grade. There was this one girl who was your typical edgy, angsty 13-year-old who was too cool for everything. When we went through our poetry unit, we gave a project in which the kids had to write their own free-form poem and put it in some sort of video or slideshow. This girl wrote a poem about how the United States education system as it is stifles creativity and destroys students' joy of learning. I always remember this one line from her poem. I learned more from an evening watching Hamilton on stage than an entire year in a United States history class. The video was your typical angsty black and white shots of her friends standing solemnly in front of or behind chain link fences and signs that say no trespassing. The next day, she showed up with a gigantic biography of Alexander Hamilton. It was bigger than most Bibles. It only took her a week to read it. My mentor teacher hated her because she thought the student thought that she was smarter than everyone else and was arrogant. Maybe she did think that. Maybe she thought we were annoying simpletons. But I just thought she was dope as heck. This kid didn't particularly like or dislike me, hated my mentor teacher, and disliked anyone except a couple friends. She was sassy and smart, had a finely tuned bull meter, and had a huge vocabulary and an obvious love of learning. She'd grill out book after book. And where my mentor teacher saw arrogance in her poem project, I just saw a girl who was desperately bored and was asking for a challenge. I tried my best to give her extra, more challenging options in the future for her assignments. She never said anything to me, but I got the feeling she appreciated it. Or I hope she did. My son has a fascination with nuclear physics and science. He's collected commonly found radioactive minerals that I made him get rid of so the whole house doesn't get cancer. He's researching a way to build a miniature thorium reactor and insists the only reason it doesn't exist now is because people have given up on it. He's 15. My oldest daughter is an incredible artist, but she's got that attitude like her poop doesn't smell. She's always made incredible drawings with simple pencils and paper since she was a child. She could capture your likeness in her mind with a glance and draw you out with a piece of standard white typing paper and an office number 2. She's now 18. This one sounds like it might be a mom just very proud and maybe exaggerating a little bit about her kids. I'm not a teacher, but my uncle is a professor at a uni in our state. He teaches a notoriously hard class where the final average is in the B range. Some kid managed to get a 99 on the exam, and because it hadn't happened in a few years, my uncle rounded the grade to a 100. I don't know if he was allowed to. And what's even more crazy is that the last person to get an A+ on the final was the student's cousin, who had recommended the class to him when he found out that he got in the school. I don't want to rat this student out, but I feel like maybe his cousin just gave him the answers. I coach Science Olympiad, which naturally draws some very smart students. I was on a long bus ride with them to nationals and sat next to one of our 7th graders. This kid had to be one of the smartest kids I've ever met. He's brilliant. We ended up playing 20 questions and I decided to be a jerk and do something really hard and specific, settling on whiptail lizard. First question, is it a vertebrate? I said yes. Second question, does it reproduce parthenogenically? Yes. Third question, it's a whiptail lizard. Kid got my obscure animal in 3 guesses. He just graduated high school last year. I believe he's going to an IV. I teach ESL in China and have this one 7-year-old student who remembers everything. He'll read a word or a sentence and then remember it a year later and point it out in his book. I had forgotten it. I'll say a word and he pronounces it perfect and always will. He speaks better than my daughter and has a larger vocabulary. I like him most because he understands what he's saying, reading, and hearing. He'll often pre-read and understand it without being told. He would brag and ask embarrassing questions until I told him that he should be trying to help the other students, and that making them feel bad slows them down. Now he helps the others understand the material. I had a student with autism who could calculate trigonometry ratios in his head to several decimal places. We can ask, "Hey George, what's the sine of 62? George would take a few seconds and shout, 0.88295. I have never figured out how he did it without a calculator. He had violent outbursts and terrible social skills. He's been in and out of jail since high school, and I've lost track of him over the years. It's really sad. I teach woodshop. The brilliance I see is different than most teachers would. I have students that I give a little knowledge and they can manipulate it and apply it to unrelated problems. I've had a few students where they have mostly D's and F's, but run rings around my students because they have crazy good 3D reasoning and can apply knowledge that isn't linear pattern recognition. I work with special needs kids and will never forget this one high-functioning autism, mostly just social and sensory issues, who was also a math genius. He was 4 years old, and whenever we would have a group play hide and seek, everyone would count to 10, except him. He would say things like, "I'll give you 20 seconds to hide, so I'll count to 540 by 27s, or some other randomness. I would listen in and write all his counts down and check them later, and he always nailed them 100%. My statistics teacher in high school wasn't the brightest, and she learned calculus-based statistics instead of what she was supposed to teach us, so she got confused sometimes. The previous semester, she had one of the smartest kids in the school in her stats class, and my high school had like 30 out of 400 people of the class every year go to Ivy League schools. Anyway, every test, the student would take the test up to my stats teacher and show her at least one problem that just wasn't right. I don't know how, because she literally told us in class how the smart kid found at least one big mistake or a better way to do the question or something every single exam. Kid came into kindergarten halfway through the year. Youngest kid in the class. The rest of the class was working on 3-letter words like cat, and he sounded out encyclopedia without difficulty. Started sending him to do math with the second graders by the end of his second week, which was holding him back, honestly. I had to talk to his parents about finding a program better suited to his needs, unfortunately. In addition to being brilliant, he was also incredibly sweet. I teach gifted and talented first and second graders. I've had a lot of very smart students over the years. Some with amazing sense where they can understand most math concepts before I teach it. For example, they see the connections between multiplication and equivalent fractions and immediately can simplify or find greatest common factors. Several read at the high school level, but maybe don't really get the social context of what they're reading. Usually I can maintain some control in the classroom because they're 7 or 8, and I'm an adult and have been teaching kids like them for years. This year, I have one little girl who writes beautifully. She's very talented, but that's all she wants to do. While I enjoy talking with her about her craft and helping her think of a good transition for scenes in her stories, these are the types of questions she has for me, I also have to teach her math, and teach the rest of the class too. Recently, she's been going through some challenging emotions. She gets angry at others, lashes out, and has been defiant with adults. So she was arguing with me about having to do a math problem on equivalent fractions when she's already demonstrated mastery of the skill. I think she's heard me use this phrase in reference to her spelling. She passed out of spelling. Honestly, she caught me off guard. So I said, fine, show me you can do these 3 problems and we'll call it good. So she did. And she got what she wanted. I realized later what she did. She's right. Really, if you can demonstrate mastery, you don't need practice. So now she tries this with everything in every skill she doesn't particularly like. She's exhausting, but she's fun to mentally spar with. I have many students who are smarter than I am, but she's the first one to outmaneuver me. I taught honors algebra in middle school, which is a class for advanced 8th graders and the occasional super intelligent 7th grader. For reference, this is a high school level class, intended for advanced 9th graders. So a 7th grader is advanced and 2 years ahead of his or her peers. I had a 6th grader show up one year, which meant he was 4 years ahead of his peers. He came in midway through the year. I gave him a book. On his first test, he got a B and had a meltdown. He was on the spectrum, an autistic savant type, and he wasn't used to not getting a perfect score. Dude went home, grabbed the book, taught himself everything he had missed in a weekend, and got a perfect 100 from there on out. Insanely gifted and amazing that he could self-teach himself half a year in a weekend. I work with toddlers sometimes, and there's this girl they moved up from the infant room at 14 months. We usually wait till around 18 plus months because she was so far ahead of everyone else. She's 18 months now and she's fully potty trained and even wears underwear. She speaks perfectly clear and you can have full-blown conversations with her. She knows all her letters, she can write her name, she can write her brother's name, she can count to 100 in English, Spanish, and American Sign Language. She knows a ton of signs and not just the easy ones. She knows more than the teachers that are supposed to teach the kids American Sign Language. She recognizes her emotions and will come up and say, "I'm not feeling very brave today," or "I'm feeling embarrassed." She can also sign to you what emotions she's feeling. When we do magnetic letters, she'll tell you the letter and the color of the letter in English, Spanish, and American Sign Language. Meanwhile, I know a 19-month-old who can only say mama, dada, and no. Kids are so diverse. I've had a few different super smart kiddos. One student of mine with autism, when given any date from the 1900s or 2000s, could tell you what the day of the week was. He tried to explain to us how he knew once, but the explanation didn't make any sense to any of us. Another student of mine was hyperlexic, essentially the opposite of dyslexia. He could write well above his grade level and read any word you put in front of him. Once we gave him one of our college textbooks and he read it back to us. Didn't understand it, but pronounced every word correctly and read it fluently. He was a first grader. Finally, I recently had a second grader who had already mastered the entirety of the 5th grade math curriculum, and everything before that. His previous teacher didn't know what to do with him, so she put him on Khan Academy all the time. I did what I could, but it's hard to keep up with kids so far above grade level.
Teachers, what was the best excuse for being late that turned out to be true? Story time. I was the only high schooler on our bus one winter. The other detail important to this story is that we had the oldest model bus that wasn't in the best mechanical shape. It had one of those mechanically operated doors, it would shoot out a plume of black smoke every time it started, and just looked much less fancy than all the other buses the school had. Anyway, one winter it was so cold that the diesel engine stopped working. The bus driver said the cold made the diesel in the lines gel up. I have no idea if that's accurate, but either way the bus wouldn't start. Fortunately, we were only 5 miles from the school and all the kids had been picked up already, so they just radioed another newer bus to loop back around and pick us up. The bus driver radioed the elementary school but completely forgot to let the high school know. So I show up to class and the teacher asks why I was late. I said, the cold caused the fuel lines to gel up in the school bus, repeating exactly what the bus driver told us. But I was the only high schooler on that bus, so no other students were there to back up my story. The teacher didn't believe me, and instead of just calling the main office to verify the story, she mocked me in front of the whole class saying, "It's not possible for fuel to freeze in the cold," and everyone in the class agreed with her, saying that I was a bad liar and laughed at how dumb my story was. Ultimately, the office did let her know about the bus after she tried giving me a detention, but the embarrassment is still there and she never gave me an apology. I don't really blame a lot of teachers for being skeptical about excuses kids make for being late and stuff, but the fact that they didn't even bother to check if there was a situation with the bus is really unreasonable. Also, yeah, apparently fuel lines can start to freeze up and everything, or the fuel inside the lines can freeze up if it's about minus 40 degrees Fahrenheit. I was the kid. Physics, 11th grade. The day prior to this day, my neighbor passed away and her son was a friend of mine and also in this class. Terribly long story, but it was a self-deletion by hanging, and I was the one who found her. I had nightmares all night and skipped the first half of school the next day. When my physics teacher saw me later, she asked me where I was that morning. Before I could explain, she said, "That friend was looking for you and concerned. He seemed more worried than he should have been and was a little upset about you not being there. The guy's mom died, but he still went to class and didn't tell anyone, but was worried about me. I couldn't tell her what had happened at that point, so I just said I overslept." Well, first of all, that's traumatizing. Second of all, it's nice that he didn't say anything when his friend obviously didn't want to say anything quite yet. And third of all, there aren't many of these from the perspective of actual teachers that I could find, so I expect a lot of "I was the kid" in these. Obligatory not a teacher, but I am an admin in a music school. I had a mom frantically call me and let me know her daughter would probably be late or miss their guitar lesson in a couple hours because she couldn't find the kid. I was just kind of okay, well, I will let her teacher know. Got another call about an hour later from the same mom. She found her kid, but apparently the daughter went to a friend's house and decided to dye her hair green? They lived pretty close by, so I did let them know they could still come in for their lesson. Mom said she would call me back and let me know in a minute or two. Never called back. Her daughter showed up for her lesson about 5 minutes late with this bright green coiffure. I gotta admit it looked rad as heck, but also kind of a confusing thing to be an audience to the build-up. I don't know about the rest of you, maybe it's just me, but I'm kinda over the whole unnaturally dyed hair look. It's cool, I don't mind it, but I know so many people still who are "Oh my god, blue hair, oh!" And I'm dude, are you is it 2010 still? Are you still in love with Ramona Flowers from Scott Pilgrim? One of my friends was training for cross country on a weekend once and she was hit by a pickup truck that ran a stop sign. She flew over the top of it and broke both her kneecaps. The pickup truck drove off. She said she can't remember any of the events that happened immediately afterwards, but the police report said that a bystander pulled over to help, and when they asked if she was alright, she just kept repeating a bunch of letters and numbers over and over, not even saying anything else except JHP 887, JHP 887, JHP 887, JHP 887. Just constantly saying it like she was in some manic state. Eventually, after the police had already been called, the dude who pulled over to help realized that those were the license plate numbers and wrote them down. There was no security footage of it, and her being able to glance at the plates was the only reason they were able to track down the truck that hit her. To this day, that is the single most awesome thing that she's ever done. I can't imagine flying over the top of a truck and having enough mental capacity in that moment to look at the license plate and memorize it while having two knees that don't have functioning kneecaps. I wish there was a silver lining to this story, but she had to have tons of surgery and to this day has some bad knees and can't really run like she used to. Not to mention the guy they tracked down didn't have any insurance and was just an elderly man who had pretty severe dementia and panicked after hitting her, so they didn't even press charges. Because of the way that they told this one, it doesn't really seem to fit in this topic. I have to commend the woman, first of all, for being able to memorize the license plate through the shock and the pain that they were probably enduring in the moment. And I guess they missed the cross-country race in the end, I assume, so I guess it counts. I apologize that I'm writing this on mobile, so there might be errors. I'm an English professor, and one year a pretty good student showed up without one of his 2 major term papers. He explained that his safe had been stolen by a contractor who was working on their house. His laptop was in the safe, and that's where his paper was. I genuinely believe him because he is being a really good student. Then, over the next few weeks, he started to show up to class looking very tired. He said that he was on a hunt for the person person who stole his safe, and he was spending late nights with his cousin driving around looking for the guy because they knew his van. Now the student and his cousin were both recently back from tours in Iraq and had seen combat experience. They wanted to find the guy to beat the tar out of him and get the safe back because his wife's wedding ring was in the safe as well as a bunch of cash. He rewrote the paper and turned it in apologetically that it wasn't up to his usual quality. But he still kept coming to class looking like he hadn't slept. After a little while, he came in very happy to my office and he reported that he found the guy after a long search that involved breaking into a drug den, shaking people down with baseball bats, and even bribing some prostitutes. He said that they found the guy's van at a Taco Bell after getting a tip from a prostitute, and they cornered him and waited for the police to come. I read in the news that he had in fact done a citizen's arrest and stopped the guy at a Taco Bell, and that they ended up calling in the Secret Service because he used the cash that he stole from the safe to buy a bunch of counterfeiting equipment. Secret Service apparently investigate counterfeiting, so the whole investigation happened because this guy, who I dubbed the White Shaft, tracked the scumbag down through the bad side of town late at night to get a wedding ring, some cash, and his research paper back. It all turned out to be true. He got the ring and the laptop back. I gladly accepted his original paper, and it got a much higher grade than the rewrite. A couple people asked for more details, so here are a few more. I can't recall the year this happened, but it was the height of the war with the US and Iraq. My student had enrolled in the army right after 9/11 on the same day as his cousin. They were both just out of high school and enrolled due to patriotism and frustration. According to him, when he started his vigilante spree, he actually went inside of a house used by a drug addict to try and find the guy. They shook the house down with baseball bats and forced everyone out into the street. When the cops showed up, they told my students how dangerous this was and not to do it again. They then gave him their card and said, "But call us if you do." They shook down at least 2 other drug dens, and the same cop was waiting outside both times to arrest people, since he didn't need to get a search warrant as everyone was outside now at the point of 2 baseball bats. I told my student about how dangerous this all was, and he was very John Wick about getting his wife's wedding ring back. Also, I tried to find a link to the story, but it was a small story and the Googles aren't being very helpful, especially since I can't remember the year. What a nerd, going through all that trouble to get a good grade. No, I'm joking, obviously. That story is awesome, and if there was like a link they could have supplied to an article, I would have been so happy. Not a teacher, but my senior year of high school, they were doing construction on the building, and so part of it was completely closed. To make up for the lack of space, there was a vocational school nearby in the district that let us use the extra rooms they did not use. To get to the other school, you could get on a bus, or if your last class of the day was at the vocational school, you could drive over there. I was driving a friend and myself over to the same English class. Traffic gets pretty stop and go at this time, as there's a lot of buses and students all going to the same place. The kid behind me wasn't paying attention during one of the stop moments and rear-ended me. Now it was stop and go traffic, so it wasn't like any of us were going fast. It was really just a bump. Still, everyone got out to see the damage and make sure everyone was okay. We were all fine. We both had piece of crap cars. We both decided that nothing was significant. May as well get back into the line of traffic and get to class. The kid who hit me was also in the same English class. My friend and I walked into class late. The teacher was known for being a stickler. Very snidely says, "You two better have a good reason for being tardy." My friend laughs and I respond, "Yeah, other classmate just rear-ended us on the way here. You can confirm with him when he gets here." So a minute later he rushes in saying, "Sorry I'm tardy, I hit CM Hooley and friend." Rest of class laughs, stern teacher makes us all get down to business. The end. I always say you should treat teachers right, but it's undeniable that either some teachers are waiting for you to slip up or actively want to get you in trouble. I mean, I once had a teacher that said to me after I questioned her teaching method, "I'm going to make your life a living hell." Took me outside away from the class and said that to my face. Had a student, player our NCAA Top 25 football team, be late to a college midterm. As a note, we are in a metropolitan area. emails me and goes, "I fully understand you think this is going to be a lie, but I found the guy unconscious in his car. Had to stop and call 911. Be there soon." This was one where it was so wild I couldn't fathom it being fake on some level. I was sitting there proctoring and thinking how I was going to have to request a police report to verify. But the kicker is the guy made it to class and finished the exam on time, and got an A from what I recall.
Good lord, he a football player, got a little big smart brain in that head of his, and he's a moral person? My god, he sounds like the whole package.
TLDR, student shows up to class with a head injury with a note to prove it. Chooses not to go home because he doesn't want to miss the activity for that day. I teach a college freshman paper writing class. Over the course of the semester, we have 2 workshop sessions where students bring in their drafts and critique each other's draft papers. Each one counts for 5% of the grade, and missing it on excuse means forfeiting that 5%. An excused absence makes the other workshop session worth 10% of the grade. Anyway, during the first workshop session, there was a student who I did not expect to be absent at all, but 60 minutes into the class, had shown up. Class is 90 minutes long. Normally, I wouldn't allow someone to come in that late, especially to a workshop session. However, he had the best excuse. He gives me this letter from a doctor at the PE department. Turns out that he had judo for PE that morning. He was paired up with a more experienced sparring partner who flipped him upside down. He landed on his head, I think. On the symptoms, the note read that he had temporary memory loss and a possible concussion. Under recommendations, it said that he should go home. I asked him why he didn't go home. He said that he didn't want to deal with the complications of missing workshop. I should note that my class was on the 5th floor of a building with no elevators and high ceilings, so he had already gone up 4 flights of stairs. I didn't want to waste his efforts, so I let him push through. He mentioned that he couldn't remember where he put his pen, needed to write comments on classmates' drafts, so I begged to one of his poor classmates to lend him one. Afterwards, I went to our faculty room and told them about it. They all called BS, and I showed them the note, which completely changed their tone. They all started accusing me of creating a pressuring classroom environment. Half joking, I think. Just want to clarify the timeline because I realize it might have caused some concern. The judo incident happened in the morning around 9 or 10 a.m. My class was from 4 to 5:30, with the student arriving 5-ish. In the time between the incident and the student arriving late to my class, he was able to rest, regained his memories, although possibly not totally since again he couldn't find his pen, was cleared from having a concussion by a doctor. The doctor wrote the note to explain why he would miss classes because the recommendation was that he go straight home, which would mean taking public transport for about an hour. He was still wearing the judo pants, and he still did a good job critiquing his classmates' work, by the way.
I once judo through a dude who poured milkshake all over my friend, called me a homophobic slur, and tried to punch me in the face, and I totally emasculated him in front of his girlfriend. That was in like early high school, like 2007, 2008.
Not a teacher, but when I was in elementary school, I remember an incident where I had a homework sheet I'd taken home to complete. I can't remember what the subject was. I do remember I spent most of my evening after dinner sitting at the table with my dad trying to complete it. This was torture. For some reason, my dad and I never connected in a learning environment. He would dictate things to me and expect me to get it, but he really struggled to walk me through the process needed for me to understand it. So after many hours of yelling and arguing and tears and being absolutely miserable, I finished the damn worksheet, set it down and went to bed. In the morning, I woke up to discover a critical error with my homework. When I set it down to get ready for bed, I had set it on top of the bird cage instead of on top of the shelf next to it. I don't know why I thought to do this instead of putting it on the shelf. I can only assume I thought flat surface good in my poor tired brain. My cockatiel was greatly offended by this mysterious new object on top of its home and had spent most of the night shredding my worksheet to pieces. I took the remains with me to school, and when they asked us to hand in the assignments, I kinda just looked at my teacher with a completely defeated expression on my face and uttered the words, my bird ate my homework. The uproar of laughter from the class was defeating. My teacher took the sheet from me and examined it carefully, then sighed as he tells me, well, it looks like you tore this page apart with a hole punch. Come see me after class. I didn't expect to be accused of lying, so in my shock I started arguing with him. No, really, my bird ate my homework, which only spurred the laughter from the class further. I didn't know what else to do. Did you ever get that frog in your throat feeling as a kid? Where your voice just seizes up and you can't manage to squeeze out any sound no matter how you might try? For years afterwards, I'd get bullies making stupid "did your bird eat your homework again" jokes from kids that had been in that class. Adult me thinks it's kind of funny. I have pushed myself, been pushed by my dad so hard just to complete that damn assignment, only to have it ruined, be accused of lying, and be embarrassed and teased for the situation. Poor 7-year-old Lanko just wasn't prepared for life yet, you know?
While I've never had a pet eat my homework, I have had my brother drink a liquid science assignment that I had in primary school, but I don't believe I was ever accused of lying about him drinking it, so that kind of turned out well for me.
Monday, my astronomy professor walked in unusually late. He was out of breath and apologized and said, I swear I'm late for a good reason, and went on to inform us about Betelgeuse, a star that has been dimming more than usual and has been debated between astronomers as to what this dimming business is all about. Some are saying maybe that's just what it does, and others are saying maybe it could go supernova. Well then, he says in what felt like a single breath, so I read an article that came out today, and some researchers suggested that Betelgeuse could be spewing out enough matter to make clouds that are interfering with how much light makes it to us. But they hadn't looked at the observatory data that corresponds to that phenomenon. So I looked over the data and found out that they were wrong, and it can't be a cloud that's causing the dimming. So I was writing to them to tell them their hypothesis was incorrect and to show them the math and data that reaches that conclusion. And he had this smile on his face like he was so proud of himself. Ended it with, so now y'all are the first to know that it is definitely not a cloud.
I don't know about the rest of y'all, and maybe this is just my personal experience, my personal opinion, but science teachers are the most passionate about their work, I find, and in turn, that makes them the cutest, in my opinion.
I teach at a community college on the Texas coast. We reopened as soon as possible after Harvey, and the excuses were insane. Someone stole our door/air conditioner/tires, and we're waiting on the police. That could take a while. Travel was hazardous in some areas. Our hot water heater exploded and the shower completely melted. We just got back into our house and it's full of snakes and seagulls. My grandmother is missing. Some teachers complained and adopted stricter attendance policies, but several of my students were homeless or living without electricity or running water and still taking time to stay in communication. So I ditched my attendance policy entirely and basically said, I'm going to be here regardless. If you can be here, great. If not, let me know you're okay as soon as you can, and I'll count you present and tell you what we went over in class. I'm proud to say that almost all my students finished the semester and most did very well in their exams. I teach psychology and I start the semester with writing assignment on stress. It gives me insight into the lives of my students, so I'm not often completely floored by odd excuses.
Sounds like a pretty rad, understanding individual.
Not a teacher, but I hear a lot of tardy excuses. My work is pretty flexible with schedules. We let people write their own work hours with start times. You can change your schedule on a whim so long as you put in 80 hours during the pay period, 2 weeks. So I, being the supervisor, had to have them check in with me when they arrived. It was so stupid. My guys have always been honest about when they were late and made up the time without question. Still, we had a couple months of them checking in on arrival. Even if someone was 1 minute late, I was required to document the reason and provide a course of action. I said screw that and put up a board for people to write in their times, excuse, and when they plan on making up the time. The excuse field was always there, so people would write in something every day. Coffee was still good to waste. Recovering from taco last night. Couldn't find clean underwear. Saw a cute redhead on the bus and decided to watch where she got off. Nothing ever came of it, and rules were lifted after a few months at my request.
Sounds like a pretty chill, reasonable dude. I wouldn't mind them being my supervisor, although I would definitely recommend you check into that guy who was looking where the redhead got off, cause that sounds semi to most definitely kinda sorta stalker-ish.
How do you subtly duck with people? When my dad was a mechanic, people would come in and describe a noise their car is making. It's kind of going screech. My dad would close his eyes and make them repeat the noise over and over while listening intently, saying, "Keep it up. I think I almost got it." Until they're basically out of breath from all this weird-sounding gibberish coming out of their mouths. Imagine other professions trying to do this. "My God, what's wrong with the engine? We have to get this plane off the ground." "Well, it kind of..." Yeah, spit it out." "Well, it kind of sort of goes like..." I don't know what's going on." Sir, listen. "Yeah?" "You're an idiot." I used to have CCTV monitors in my office at a pretty large store, so I would call different departments and hang up right before they picked up the phone and call them back as soon as they turned around. After a few tries, they would stand and wait for the phone to ring again, but I'd wait until the exact second they turned around. Nobody ever found out who it was. Easily the best entertainment ever. When someone sneezes, I tell them to shut up, and they almost always reply, "Thank you," because they are so used to other people saying, "Bless you." Hi, narrator here. I know it's so short, but it's just the idea of this is so funny. Just, shut up. Thank you. Or I wonder what if it got even like more aggressive, just like, achoo! Shut up! Thank you. I work in pathology, and I spend most of my day dictating into a microphone. I keep myself entertained by messing with the ladies in transcription in a myriad of ways. One thing I like to do is pick a random word and slightly mispronounce it all day just to mess with their heads. One time, we received a tube of chapstick, a small tube of toothpaste, and a bottle of skin lotion that the ER had taken out of someone's backside. Not sure if they were a little freaky or just mentally ill. After I dictated that case and described the items, I went to the gift shop and bought the same items and then left them on their desk with a note that said, "No need for these to go to waste." They were confused but had used the hand lotion. By the time they listened to the dictation, I could hear them shout from down the hall. Also, since I recite a lot of case numbers, anytime a number happens to have 666 in it, I will immediately say, "Mark of the Beast!" and use my phone to play an evil laugh and sounds from hell. On Halloween, I taught myself how to say a couple of sentences backward and then recorded it and played it backwards into the microphone. That one freaked them out a bit. If there is ever a really good joke on Reddit jokes, I will end my dictation for the day by telling the joke to them. I also like to do prank calls. I'm the peanut butter jelly guy. When I'm on a waiting list at a restaurant, I always put the name down as Parpar. About half the people kind of hesitate or look at you weird. Play it straight and just spell it out if that happens. When you're called over the loudspeaker, it sounds like they're stuttering, "Parpar, party of four?" You can also do weird funny names that are just barely believable. Yes, people, obviously not every restaurant says party. Use another name for those. As far as the loudspeaker goes, I mainly use this at a very busy breakfast joint on the weekends. They have outdoor waiting and therefore announce names. It will work for any type of calling out names. I have a pretty good memory when it comes to stories that my friends have told me, so I like to retell their own story to them a year or two later, now starring myself, and see how long it takes for them to catch on. They start off with a look of, "Oh man, I could tell some of the story as soon as he ends this." Then it turns into a look of, "Wait, that's my freaking story." A buddy of mine will randomly wish me happy birthday on Facebook when it's not my birthday. So then a bunch of other people wish me a happy birthday and I have to explain it's not my birthday. This ducker does it every year. A couple of weeks ago, he posted on my wall, "Congratulations, man. I knew you'd land that opportunity. So proud of you." That followed by a couple dozen people asking me what had I accomplished. I had someone whose birthday was a day before mine. At 11:45 p.m., as we ate dinner, I pointed out it was his birthday, and without question, the staff did the song, dance, and clap. At 12:01 a.m., he then told them it was my birthday. The server demanded ID. Then I got a very, very unenergetic song, dance, and clap. I swear, even the cake looked slump. Best proof I ever had that servers hate that crap. Make up a hobby or skill for your friend. Over a period of weeks or months, nonchalantly describe your friend's aptitude at this skill to your common friends or colleagues. If you pick something general enough, your friend will encounter lots of questions and it might snowball. Examples: Dan is a very good artist. He painted this for me. Show them a picture of some art someone else painted. Did you hear Dan won an award for his artistic skills? Dan is actually a really good singer. He sung in that state championships last summer. Did you know Margaret fixes watches? Bonus points if you pick someone you only vaguely know. Then you can deny starting the rumor and blame someone that knows him even better. In public places like malls or grocery stores, I nonchalantly thank random people. I say, "Hey, I saw what you did back there, and I just want to say thanks. That was great." Most people don't appreciate little things like that anymore, but I do. Then walk away. Bonus points if you pat them on the back. I knew a friend that did this once because he lost a bet and went, "I just want to thank you," and awkwardly handed him $5 and walked away. Use a fake name when ordering food for delivery. Use a different name each time, but always use the same number. After a while of doing this, they get a huge list of names. After putting your phone number in whatever system they use, pay cash each time. You can hear them hesitate for a moment as they try to figure out why there are so many names with different last names as well. Usually they'll ask if you're the person that's the most recent on their list. Always say no and give them a brand new name. I also like to use names that sound weird in a fake kind of way but aren't super obvious. Chester Elegante, as an example. At the Varsity Chicken Wings joint nearby Syracuse U, would enter name as Icarus for the announcement, "Icarus, your wings are ready." I used to work in a call center a few years ago. We had to take customers' details and I'd always repeat back to them to make sure they were correct. While I was doing this though, I'd duck with them by saying things like, "Oh, is that K for knife? P for pterodactyl? Yeah?" Good old silent letters. Get them heavily involved in a good conversation while standing and just hand them something. Don't look at it. Keep the conversation going, keep eye contact, and hand them anything, from a tennis ball to a rock you just picked up. Almost every time they'll grab it without thinking. Works even better if talking and walking. See how much stuff they can hold. Keep looking at a spot a few feet behind them with a worried expression. Look back at them and smile again. Look 3 feet behind them this time. Look a little more scared. Repeat and escalate until they get really uncomfortable and look behind them. It works even though they know you're messing with them. There was one guy in the music department who would always leave his phone on whatever desk he was working at. Every single time I'd walk by, I'd pick it up and move it slightly, no more than 6 inches away, and keep walking. I never took it. I never moved it far. I did this several times a day for several months. Then I stopped. I walked by and instinctively he went to put it back and missed. The look of shock on his face made my life. A family opened this small local theater and we went a couple of times during October and watched Annabelle and Nightmare on Elm Street. After everyone got deep into the movie, the staff would sneak up behind us, dressed in black, and duck with us pretty hard. Their kid crawled as fast as he could down the row seats and rubbed up against our legs. That was the best one. It was freaky, but hella fun. I don't know, man. I think that would be kind of crazy to send your kids into the dark theater to mess with people as they're watching a scary movie. What if somebody stomped their foot down to the child going, "No, not today, Annabelle! Grr!"
No, please. I didn't mean to.
Like, that's a lawsuit waiting to happen. Why would you do this? No! Stop! I had a roommate in college that rarely went out to drink, but when he did, he got completely trashed and usually ends up having no recollection what had happened. So whenever we would be drinking together, I'd take a handful of leaves from outside and hide them in his room in places like under his laundry pile, under his bathroom sink, in his jacket pocket, toaster, in the closet, etc. He still thinks he has a leaf hoarding habit whenever he goes out to drink with us. Wait, you had a toaster in your closet? I saw this on another thread. Can't remember the name of the hilarious person who wrote this, but start out with a subtle lisp when talking to someone you usually see on your own and when others aren't likely to be around when you speak to them. Over the coming weeks, make the lisp more prominent until you can barely be understood by that person. When it has become so bad that they cannot at all understand you, just drop it. Start talking normally again. The guy who's been trying to figure out what you're saying will be so confused. If he asked about it completely, deny it. Act baffled each time he brings it up. Bonus points if he starts asking other people. For example, Steve and Jerry, starting with Steve. Hey, Jerry, you know the guy from accounting? Yeah, dude, what about him? You've heard his lisp, right? He's not got one anymore. Jerry gives a weird look. Dude, he's never had a lisp. I don't know what you're talking about. Steve will be completely mind-ducked. You could also apply this to having a weird accent that suddenly drops. Not a real accent, just a really weird, unrecognizable accent that nobody can figure out. I really love bananas. I take a couple with me every day to work for mid-morning snacks. I decided to make it a habit of taking a break every time I was eating one to stroll over to a coworker's desk, chat with her while eating, and throw the peel into her garbage bin before walking back to my desk. She would deal with the smell for the rest of the day. It took a week before I got a, if you throw that in there, I'm gonna end you. I mean, dude, I don't know, I might feel the same. I have a very sensitive nose, and if you're coming over and just like dumping your crap into my garbage can that I have to work next to for the whole day and be like, no, that is not a funny prank. That is a disaster. Please don't do this. Please, just no. If you're in a group of people, all of you line up along both sides of an exit. When someone walks out, everyone start clapping and cheering for the person. Some friends and I did this on the subway metro in Singapore while waiting for a train. Some of the reactions are priceless. My one friend and I refer to every animal as kitty, or some variation of it, i.e. wolves are howling moon kitties, meerkats are stand-up kitties, and obviously ferrets are snake kitties. We often ducked with people, like one time when I insisted that this girl's gross dog was a slobber kitty. She was super proud of having this purebred dog, so she was getting quite flustered over the whole thing and practically yelling the breed of her dog at me. The first friend I mentioned walks in after not having heard this argument, and the girl says to him, "You can tell what breed my dog is, right?" And he replies, "Slobber kitty," without missing a beat. She got so mad. Definitely a subtle one, but I like it. I work in a restaurant. As a servant to the public, it's easy to get down on your job. Subtle things really help make you feel less like a backside-kissing peasant. Almost every time I run a tray of food, I make eye contact with the nearest table that's waiting on food and give them a look and smile as if I'm coming right for them to deliver their meal. Then I pass right by them and take it to the actual table. I love when people interrupt their conversation with, "Hey, here's our food." Oh, only to be left disappointed. A little sociopathic, considering most of these people didn't do anything to me, but it's just a nice way to feel in control at a job where you are so often walked on. "It was you! You did this to me! Oh, come on! I've definitely had this happen to me somewhere before. No! Now I know your tricks. Now I know. I'm gonna watch you and bring like, hey, you get back here. Ah! I looked after my buddy's house when he was on vacation. I took every photo out of its frame, scanned it, photoshopped me in somewhere, printed them, replaced in frames. Months after he got back, he called me saying his brain was telling him something was wrong, but he rarely looked at the photos anymore, so it didn't click until his sister was over and saw the altered photos. One of my best friends is generally quite impatient, and for the last 8 years, I've been purposefully waiting for the last ring whenever he phones me to answer because I know he hates it. The best part, though, is I periodically tell him every so often that I'm doing something that he hates to duck with him, but I'm not telling him what it is, which drives him nuts as he can't figure it out and often insists I'm lying. I do a bunch of things to mess with him, but this is my fave as it's the longest running, lowest effort, mildest inconvenience that gets maximum annoyance. When we're closing down my store, there's a small vestibule at the back door where we have to stand still for about 20 seconds so that we can arm the motion alarm before leaving. As a rule, no one can be in the store alone, and so some employee always has to be with me for this process. I fart every single time. If they move, then the alarm won't set and we have to stand there even longer. In high school, I would sit in the back with my buddies, and whenever we had a substitute, I would sit completely still with my mouth gaping open until drool started pouring out slowly and dripping all over my notebooks. Sub would have zero idea why someone with such a seemingly debilitating mental handicap was in a regular class. Of course, they were far too uncomfortable to say anything that might suggest something was wrong with me. On the side note, I never did the deed in high school. I was once inspired by a post here on Reddit where someone replaced one of their family portraits with a picture of Vladimir Putin. One day when our parents were at work, my brother and I did the same thing by changing out a picture of ourselves with one of Putin bottle feeding a baby goat. We thought it was inconspicuous enough to go unnoticed for a little while, but we both gave it less than a day before our parents would notice. 6 months later, I'm in the middle of my college semester and I get 2 texts. One from my brother saying, "They found Putin," and the other from my dad saying, "You clever plastard." I used to manage a fleet of company cars. One of my friends who worked with me had a car for my fleet. He doesn't know I had spare keys for all of them. The parking lot is not large. You can fit about 50 cars in it. They're all company cars, and there's no reserved parking. So, being the friendly jerk I am, shortly after he arrived at work, I would go out for my smoke break and move his car over 1 or 2 spots. Sometimes I would even reverse the car back into the same spot, if he went in front first. I shuffled his car around the parking lot every 3rd day for about 4 months straight, but never too far from his initial spot. One day after work, we were at the pub getting a pint. He says to me, "Man, I'm so tired when I get to work. Sometimes I can't even remember where I parked my car." It's been almost 2 years to this day. I still move his car, but I've reduced the frequency to about once a week. He still doesn't know. In my apartment building, there is an unprotected Xfinity Wi-Fi. I have my own Wi-Fi, so I never connect to that one, but for some strange reason, one day, my phone connected to it on its own. So not knowing it did that, I started watching YouTube on my phone and accidentally hit the Chromecast button at the top of the screen. And when I pressed it, it gave me 2 different smart TVs to cast to. I had a huge evil grin on my face. So first, I immediately searched a Rickrolled video and casted it to one of the TVs. I thought this was hilarious, but I wanted to be more clever. I started playing all sorts of different videos. Girl ripping out her hair with a drill while eating corn, 2 frap videos, South Park videos, 4 words, all uppercase. Halfway through the last video, the connection ends. I guess they finally figured out how to turn it off. So the next day, I came home from work and checked my mail, and next to all the mailboxes was a very angry letter to the whole building. Really me. Can't remember it word for word, but it said something like, "Whoever the rump hole is putting videos on our TV, please stop Stop! We have young kids, and now they are repeating the inappropriate language that was in those videos. I immediately bust out laughing in the middle of the hallway, and believe me, I will be doing it again. I had a coworker once who was a real jerk. I started making fun of bald customers to their face in a friendly manner. It was a cigar store. Making light is mandatory on a frequent enough basis when he was around to make him think I really got grossed out by bald people. I don't, and I think I'm probably going bald. It was all part of my long con. After I got him thinking about baldness on a regular basis, I brought in my shills. I talked to customers I was friends with. Under my instruction, they'd always stare at his hair when they saw him or ask, "Did you get a haircut or something?" Every time they talked to him, we went to the same barber. Neighborhood dude, cut his first cigar. So I talked to the barber into asking him, "So, you want me to do anything about, like the thin parts?" After 6 months of this, he was constantly checking his hair in the mirrors, the glass around the shop, asking all the darn time if I thought he was balding. It was hands down the most sociopathic and impressive thing I have ever done in petty revenge. It was like a total of 9 months of work, involved half my customers and eventually the owner of the store. He had the thickest hair I've ever seen. People complimented him on it, but that jerk farted in my face one time while I was eating quiche, and you don't duck with a man's quiche. Wow. So this man literally went Liam Neeson on this. Like this guy just like walking around and just being dumb. Be like, ah, and he just looks up, his quiche ruined. "Darn you. I will remember this day. Revenge is best served cold. Just like my quiche, which is now cold and smelly."
What film made you say, "Holy crap, there's still 50 minutes left"? The Sound of Music. They get married and I said, that was a nice ending, and my wife says, the Nazis haven't even arrived. Some people don't realize that The Sound of Music actually had an intermission, and they only watched half of the movie. I literally had no idea there was a second VHS tape until this Reddit thread. Maybe we bought it used because I only remember seeing the first half. The Sound of Music had Nazis? I must have only seen the first half as well. Pearl Harbor. There's a climactic attack on Pearl Harbor. It's explosive and tragic, some people getting hurt or worse, and then the movie slows down and keeps going for another hour. Ugh. Pearl Harbor is a 2-hour movie squeezed into 3 hours. Roger Ebert. The Batman. I know people love it, but I found the movie extremely boring and almost fell asleep. The car chase scene was basically him getting stuck in traffic. I've seen more exciting things happen on a Texas highway. If you just watch the trailers, you've basically seen the best parts of the movie. Save yourself the 3 hours. I should also point out, because it might not seem this way, but I love Batman, so this movie was a big letdown for me. I actually enjoyed the Batman up until the scene where he choked down that bomb and walked away with absolutely no injuries, not even the slightest burn on his face. After seeing that, I looked at the remaining time on the movie and noticed there was still almost 2 hours left. You know, that opinion isn't as controversial as the OP might make it seem. I think after Nolan did the realistic Batman in the Dark Knight trilogy, we didn't need to see that again. For me, it's Titanic. Back in the 90s where VHSs were still a thing, Titanic the movie was split between 2 VHS tapes. The first being all about the onboarding and the love story, while the second finally had the iceberg hit and sinking after spending all of what felt like another hour on the love story. I would always doze off before the second VHS tape got entered. My family eventually stopped playing part 1 and we would just go straight to part 2 whenever we decided to watch Titanic again. I will admit that I, then a 13-year-old boy, cried seeing Titanic in the theater. But it was because I drank a Mountain Dew too quickly and didn't want to miss the drawing scene, better than I could have hoped for. And the sinking by getting up to go use the restroom. I was the closest I've ever been to bursting my bladder. Full Metal Jacket, in an excellent way. When I was a kid, my family used to watch this on Laserdisc. I think it's the only movie we had that not only had to flip the disc, but that there was a second disc. I'm pretty sure with the multiple intermissions, this is why my family considers it a Christmas movie. Although my dad claims it's because they sing Happy Birthday to Jesus. Full Metal Jacket, the family Christmas movie that everyone loves. Daft Punk's Electroma. Good freaking God. It was a solid hour of robots walking through the desert. I love Daft Punk, but that film was excruciating even by French film standards. Which is so weird because Interstellar 5555 is totally a masterpiece. As someone who has casually listened to Daft Punk over the years, I had no idea that they had films for their music. I guess that's something I have to look into. Transformers Age of Extinction. That movie was so awful, I never even finished it. Spoiler, Galvatron runs away like a punk and Lockdown gets split in two by Optimus' thick metal rod. Then Optimus flies into space and says he's gonna destroy his creator. My husband won free tickets to that movie. We went to the cinema together. I was actually enjoying it. I found the whole thing ridiculous and not believable, but I enjoyed myself. Then there was a long time of explosions and then the movie ended, I thought. I was like, great, 90 minutes is a good length for a movie. And then they went to freaking China and took another hour to end. It was so incredibly boring, which could have all been avoided if they cut it at the 90-minute mark. The extended version of The Lord of the Rings. I didn't realize how much additional footage there was. It's all amazing though. I've run out of food and there's still 20 days of film left. Please send help. This might get me flamed in the comments, but I've never seen Return of the King, and I saw The Two Towers at a midnight screening and really enjoyed it. Black Adam. I know it was only 2 hours, but to me it felt so much longer. My husband and I thought the same thing. I paused it saying, God damn, how much longer do we have? And then we saw it was 2 hours total. Felt like a glitch in the Matrix or something. At one point during Black Adam, I legit thought the movie was over since it had a climax and then there was still another 30 minutes left. Pirates of the Caribbean: Curse of the Black Pearl. Not in a bad way. I just remember feeling like I was watching the climax and then it just kept going. Would have agreed with the sequels, but I actually thought the first Pirates was a perfect movie. My brother usually quotes Barbossa, Jeffrey Rush, when not wanting to do something. I'm disinclined to acquiesce to your request. It means no. I prefer, the code is more like what you call guidelines than actual rules. The Pirates of the Caribbean series are some of my absolute favorite films to watch. They are just straight fun. Gone Girl. In my defense, I know nothing about it and thought it was a rom-com/chick flick. Was going through a toxic divorce at the time and went to see this to take my mind off my troubles. I just sat shell-shocked afterwards. My other movie was World War Z. Near the end, there was this tense scene where he has to walk past one teeth-gnawing zombie. I let out an involuntary and inappropriate laugh at how much it resembled my ex in zombie makeup. It was meant to be a tense scene. Also, when the scientist got scared and ran and tripped down the ramp and shot himself, I was the lone person in the theater who laughed at the sheer absurdity of it. I was on my third date and my GF broke it off because she thought I was a manic. Dude, you're not alone. When he runs back to the ramp and slips and falls and accidentally shoots himself in the face, and Brad Pitt's face had just so much disappointment on it, after they spent a good 15 minutes building the scientist up as the last hope of humanity, it was hilarious. I've never seen World War Z, but I love a good bad movie. I might have to check this one out. Artificial Intelligence. Man, that movie dragged. And then it finally had the bittersweet ending and I was like, yeah, not my thing, but I can totally see why people like it. And then it went on. That movie was the prime example of the adage that part of knowing how to paint a great masterpiece is knowing when to stop painting. Well, geez, Stanley Kubrick died before filming it. How much harder did you want him to stop? Okay, I'm not gonna lie, that joke made my jaw drop. Hateful Eight. The movie is one long conversation, but in a good way. I love that film. My uncle was in hospice having palliative care with his own room a few years ago. I asked him what his favorite films are, and I downloaded them and put them on a drive. I know what types of films he likes. He was in his 90s and loved westerns and was fine with violence in movies. So I added Hateful Eight. On the night before he died, he told the nurse that he was fine and he was going to bed to watch the rest of this really long film I had given him, which he said was great. The next morning, he got up happy, sat in his chair, and died. Okay, I wasn't expecting a movie scene to come out of this comment section, but as for the long conversation comment, isn't that all Tarantino films? Wonder Woman 1984. Can't believe I'm not seeing this mentioned already. I remember checking how long was left and saying, Jesus Christ, for real? When there was nearly an hour to go. We really enjoyed the first one, so we had a big family movie night, not something we do often, and dragged everyone in to watch the sequel. It was really disappointing. Every film ever since the internet destroyed my attention span. Honestly, one of the best parts of going to a theater is the fact that the social code of the setting forces you to disconnect. It's too easy to check your phone and get distracted by life when you're watching a movie at home. Hell, I've made it through stinkers in a theater I definitely wouldn't have if I was watching them on Netflix or Hulu. I'm looking at you, Jurassic World Dominion. Everything Everywhere All at Once. Once it hit the second half, I had no idea where it was going or how it was going to resolve in a satisfying way. But it did, and is now one of my favorite movies ever. I still want to watch that movie. It looks pretty awesome. Spicy videos after those first 2 minutes. Black Panther Wakanda Forever. It's just a lot of filler. At least the title of the film is honest. The brand new Puss in Boots: The Last Wish, in a good way. Rented the movie and was blown away early on, and seeing more time had me excited to see it through. Really glad to see DreamWorks doing well, and I recommend for others to watch it. This movie has to be one of the most go-watch word-of-mouth movies in such a long time. I constantly hear people mentioning this movie, and I thought it was gonna be something that people would pass over. Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice. When Bats and Supes are done fighting, and you know the fight with Doomsday was still going to happen, the name of the movie was the first clue that it was going to be an overly long slog. They could have made the whole Doomsday topic into a separate movie, but nope, gotta combine it with the literal god going against a guy wearing a Coke can. I don't care what anyone says about BVS, it gave me the best Batman fight scene of all time, so I will always stand up for that movie. That Batman was so much more entertaining than realistic Batman. The new Elvis biopic. I wasn't a fan overall, but holy hell, they could have cut 30 to 40 minutes and ended up with the same film. The film had too much dialogue as well, needed a little less conversation and a little bit more action. The only scene I've seen from that film is the "he's white" scene, and it's only because it became a meme on Twitter. Star Trek: The Slow Motion Picture. The Matrix 4, didn't finish it because it was too boring. I had to watch some parts of it again because I literally slept halfway through it, and I'm a Matrix fan. I'll be honest, that movie tried to be so meta it felt like it was a parody. A History of Violence, in a good way. What seems like an ending to a typical good movie happens about halfway through the runtime. I was really stunned and excited to see where it went next. Twilight, the tree scene almost made me chuck my laptop across the room. They are so terrible that they loop back around to being fun. If you have a group of friends who were really into Twilight in middle school or high school, it forces you to relive your younger cringe self. I thought it couldn't be that bad. Surely my early 20s self wasn't that bad. Oh god, the cringe was next level. My friend and I had a great time though, binging the films over a weekend and drinking. I remember that one close family friend that took me to see it in theaters. I think I was 13. Anyways, I remember her sitting there and laughing at how horrible it was, and the teenage me was so offended. I still haven't seen those films, and I'm not sure if I ever will. I do love the lore of these movies inspiring the writer of 50 Shades of Grey though. That Zack Snyder Justice League movie. Was all excited to see it, and then about 2 hours in, I was checking how long I had left. It was about an hour. I never finished it. I think he made a good choice to have it broken into parts that had their own little title screens. It's like going to a theater and having an intermission. Shame it felt like, I might as well get through this, rather than, oh boy, can't wait to find out what happens next. But I'm glad Snyder took out the part where the Flash accidentally motorboats Wonder Woman. You know, the classic scenario that seems to pop up in Whedon movies, or at least in superhero movies. I remember it happening between Bruce Banner and Black Widow in Age of Ultron as well. I will never watch that movie again. After the 2 hour mark, I couldn't believe that there was still 2 hours left. Also, every time Wonder Woman showed up, she went into slow-mo and they played her music. It got so freaking annoying. Thor, Love and Thunder. When we saw how much time was left, we just shut it off. Fun fact, I think Thor Ragnarok is the worst MCU film. I know people won't agree, but when Bruce Banner says he's going to show who he is and then jumps off the plane to bounce off the bridge, I wanted to break my TV. Every character morphed into a child in that film. Gangs of New York. Don't get me wrong, it was a great flick, but holy crap, it dragged on. The Return of the King. It had a lot of endings for all the things it had to wrap up, and I mistakenly bought the extra large Pepsi. I also have to say Lord of the Rings Return of the King. Throw the bloody ring in, Frodo, for God's sake. The whole cinema clapped when he finally did it. When I saw it in theaters, I started gathering up my stuff 4 separate times thinking we were at the end. When it did actually finally end, I just sat there, thinking it must be a trick and I will not be fooled into putting one arm into my coat sleeve again. The Last Jedi. I was ready to leave after the space battle and thought the ships were going down to the Red Sand planet and that was going to be the credit roll. The Casino Planet side quest took forever. I'm one of those people that actually like the film only because it didn't feel like a repeat of other Star Wars films. In a good way, Saving Private Ryan. The Normandy sequence is like 30 minutes and then the rest of the movie is like 50 minutes. Gladiator had me saying, holy crap, there is only 50 minutes left? He enters the Coliseum in the second half of the movie. I felt like it had just started. I haven't watched the theatrical cut in over a decade now. The extended gives it room to breathe, better justifies the subplots with Lucia and with Maximus's old servant, and doesn't drag because the film already had me wanting more. It also gives context to the "are you not entertained" line when the slave owner says to him, "you're an entertainer" before the fight. Rewatching it for the first time in a long time recently, I found it baffling that they would cut that line when it only adds about a minute to the runtime. "Are you not entertained" is one of the most iconic lines ever. Me and my friends always throw that out when we have an epic moment in any video game we play. For me, it has to be The Omen from 2006. Not because the movie was bad or terrible, I mean honestly I don't remember it being great either, but what happened before I even entered the theater had more entertaining twists than that whole movie. At the time, I wasn't able to legally get into an R-rated movie alone, and I was supposed to watch this movie with a bunch of friends. Well, all of my friends managed to get into the theater and I was still stuck outside. So I asked a random couple if they would be willing to pretend to be my parents. The woman, who was pretty attractive, put her arm around me and helped me get in. Once I was in, I told them thank you, but before I could leave, the guy stopped me and said, "No problem, but I don't want to see you causing any trouble during the movie." And then he flashes his police badge at me. I was just so stunned that a cop just helped me get into an R-rated movie. It was a pretty cool moment and something I definitely remember more than anything in that movie. The Girlfriend Experience. People might not know this film, but it stars this actress named Sasha Grey. People of culture might know who she is. But I went to go see this film at a small art house theater and I was just waiting for the movie to be over because I thought it was so bad. There were moments in this movie where some scenes were completely overexposed and you could barely see the actors. If I'm being honest, I would have had more fun just watching some of Sasha Grey's home movies instead. I didn't know The Girlfriend Experience was a movie. I always thought it was a TV series. The more you know. Sasha Grey might not have made it as an actress, but she's doing pretty well as a Twitch streamer. Any MCU movie after Guardians of the Galaxy Part 1. I'm not sure what happened, but Disney saw the success of that movie and thought, everyone loves it because it's funny. Why not make all our characters funny? And since then, every main character seems like they need to be a comedian, and the term comic relief character has been thrown out the window into a garbage truck, taken to the dump, and had a nuclear bomb dropped on it. I honestly stopped watching the MCU after Endgame because I felt like they were leaning into the comedy over great storytelling. Plus, Endgame just felt like the perfect jumping off point with everything that happened in the movie. 2001: A Space Odyssey. Look, I respect Stanley Kubrick, and this movie was absolutely gorgeous and had a lot of shots that looked perfect, but what even was this movie? I was just so bored the whole time while I was looking at these perfectly shot scenes. The Dark Knight in the best ways. Yup, this is the one. After he finally catches the Joker, it feels like the end, but the film still has ways to go. I remember thinking, wait, it's not done yet? When I first watched it. Yeah, and the scene leading up to the catch is so dramatic and high production, it totally could have passed for a good finale. Pretty much any big superhero movie. They all have this big battle sequence about an hour and a half in, and you go, wow, okay, movie done. And then they have to build up to another, more final battle. I really liked Venom 2 for that reason. 90 minutes, I got in, they did their stuff, and I left. Top Gun Maverick. After seeing them do the real mission and Mav gets shot down, I really thought they were just gonna end it there and finish it in a sequel. But then it just kept going and it was so good. Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. The entire movie is amazing, but damn does it take a while. I just felt like that whole movie was stuff almost happening with no payoff until the end. Cruella. Not 50 minutes, but I thought the movie was over when she visited the fountain and delivered the monologue to her mother. Then it still got better. Django Unchained. I really enjoyed the movie, but dear lord it could have ended like 3 times. This was Tarantino's first movie after the death of his longtime editor. In my honest opinion, his work has taken a notable downturn as a result. I'm down with Django, but Hateful Eight and Once Upon a Time in Hollywood were way too long. Avatar 2. I just wanted to piss, but the movie just dragged on too long. But with that said, the second half was really entertaining, to be fair. Yeah, I was like, dude, Jim, we're all seeing this movie in the theaters with good recliners and fancy drinks. The human bladder is not meant to absorb a pint of IPA and then watch this much water splashing around. I saw this with a friend, and my summary of it was this. I felt like I had just watched 2 years of a badly edited TV series in one sitting. I still haven't seen Avatar 2, really don't have any interest. I mean, the first one was basically just Pocahontas and Ferngully mixed together. David Cronenberg's Crash. Play started out packed, then I realized after 30 minutes I was one of a handful of people left watching this messed up movie. When it finished, I was the only one of 3 left in the theater. Wow, that's all I can say. When I first read this, I thought they were talking about the movie Crash that beat out Brokeback Mountain at the Oscars for Best Picture. The Revenant. Gah, I saw that movie in theaters and it was so packed, so I had to sit way too close to the screen. And it gave me such a horrible migraine. So I'm sitting there in this movie that won't end and my head is killing me. If I had been there with my husband, I would have just asked to leave, but we had gone with friends. And we hadn't driven ourselves, so I didn't feel like I could. I was so miserable. Final Fantasy: The Spirits Within. Right after the Phantom destroys New York and Alec Baldwin's friends all die, I thought, okay, we should be wrapping this up in the next 10 minutes. Nope! It was another 30 minutes of slogging through an already boring and lazy story. I had to watch Stanley Kubrick's Spartacus for a college class about 3 years ago, and it was awful. From the sound to the pacing and the 5-minute breaks that were just music and a blank screen, it was just overall a horrible experience. Eyes Wide Shut. Most boring film I've ever seen in my life, and I had to go watch it for a class so I couldn't just stop watching it. I hate that movie. And the jerk who plays only one note on the piano for 20 minutes of this horrible movie.
Teachers, what do you know about your students that they think you don't know? I have never understood how students think if they lower their volume by 2 notches we suddenly become deaf. It's an enclosed space with 15 to 30 other people. If I don't hear it once, it will probably get repeated and I'll hear it again. I think the issue is students think we have so much on our plate with a lesson that we're in a whole other world. But really, this could be the 3rd or 4th time I've done this lesson this week, or even the 20th time in my career. When everything is basic rehearsal, you can zone out into other conversations pretty easily. I know who the loose girls are, the illegal substance dealers, the gang members, and when the fights are going to occur. I know each administrator has about 5 fake social media accounts and keeps tabs on what everyone is saying, and by Monday I will know what shenanigans you got up to over the weekend. I also know how to get out of going to the rally, which narc will look the other way and let you ditch class, and where people do the illegal substances on campus. I know that during lunch some have SX in the bathroom next door to my classroom, but they use protection. I've seen the used condoms on the floor, and by the end of the first month of school, I know when you're lying and I know when you've had a crappy night at home. I know who has crappy parents and who has no parents. I know of one of my students who sometimes sleeps on the park bench and a few who are abused. I know several who take care of their siblings. I know of learning disorders and mental disorders. I know how much you have the capacity to handle and know that math is not the most important thing in the world. My 8th graders call me Miss B because for some reason they can never remember or pronounce my full name. One of my classes has started calling me Miss Booty. When I hear them using it with each other, I pretend that I heard my name and ask if they need any assistance in the most chipper and obnoxious teacher voice possible. It's nice to see them jump when I respond. It's also nice to take a break from overhearing disgusting, prepubescent, school bathroom, counter, nasty business, bus ride, BJ horror stories by dropping in on the Pokemon conversations that spring up every now and then from the quiet kids that are probably even bigger weirdos. As the daughter of a teacher, you just learn things about students you never repeat, and you learn things about other teachers. My mom teaches special education, and she is bound to secrecy about everything, and she doesn't let up on it. But I hear other teachers talk about students like they're garbage. They talk about the parents, they even talk about each other. Teachers are the worst gossips. You want to hear some crap? Just stay after school. I teach at a public university. For something like 8 years, I've been sitting in on the first day of class every semester, quietly dressed like a student. Every
Every now and then one or two of them catch on, but most of them are clueless. They start talking about how they haven't done the homework for the first day, or how they've looked me up on Rate My Professor, or why I'm such a tool and late on the first day. I hear about being high or drunk or hungover that morning. I usually wait about 10 minutes when they're thinking of leaving before I stand up and start class. Maybe it's because I'm English, but I've discovered how hard it is for me to say a word like start and then follow it up with class, start class, but rather I go start class because obviously they sound more similar. I only bring this up because I'm sure people have maybe noticed that sometimes I deviate between something like grass and grass, bath or bath, and start and class. God, I'm all tongue-tied now. Middle school teacher here. When you put your hand in front of your mouth to talk to whisper to a friend, I can tell, and your voice isn't nearly as quiet as you think it is, so I can hear what you're saying too. When you're staring at your crotch and giggling every once in a while, I know you're texting, you're on social media, but sometimes I don't say anything because that's the only time you're not disrupting the rest of the class. When I do take your phone away until the end of the day, I hand it over to the dean who checks all your texts and social media accounts you're logged into. We bust your friends by checking who you're texting during school hours and email their teachers so they can just coincidentally notice their phone. When you're out for a family emergency for a week and come back with a tan and a tourist t-shirt, I know you're lying, especially when this is the third time in 2 years your grandmother has died. Seriously, please come up with something that doesn't insult my intelligence quite so much. You did understand your homework, you just didn't prioritize accomplishing it. The kids that didn't understand but tried used the 20 different tools I provided to assist you with it, and brought it to me before or at the beginning of class, not when I asked you to turn it in. Also, the dean and counselor fill me in on all your behavior and home issues. The nurse, who really is supposed to keep your medical issues private, is the biggest gossip in the school. Last of all, when you screw up and I have to call you on it, just acknowledge and or apologize. I don't want to reprimand you or correct you any more than you want it, but it's part of my job. It's annoying to call your parents and fill out the paperwork when you screw up big. I won't turn it into a big deal unless you escalate it to a point that I have to do something about it. Well, based on the information that this person is giving, it sounds like this school has it on lockdown. I mean, it seems kind of invasive in some ways, but like they said, you're not supposed to have your phone out in class. I used to be in IT, but had a very messy divorce a couple of years back, and I now teach English in international schools in Japan. We all have school-issued computers with a integrated social network, and I can see all of the messages that the students send, even the private ones, to monitor online bullying, and I am not to let anyone know that I can see students' private messages. I got curious and started spying on them full-time. I learned about a couple of serious relationships between my class and one heterosexual and one homosexual, as well as learning that one of my students has a serious crush on me. Another came out of the closet, but everyone knew already, and then ended up dating a classmate. One girl went completely MIA, and all of us, including me, assumed she had deleted herself. I started getting strange emails about her death, but it turned out she had simply moved away, and all of the kids knew I was spying on them. I live and teach high school kids in a small town, and one of my students, just this total sweetheart, wonderful girl, is dating the scariest guy I have ever seen. Huge dude, lots of tattoos and piercings, way older than her, drives a souped-up deathmobile around town, that kind of thing. Just all around a sketchy guy. It's big school gossip. Everybody knows and talks about it all the time. This student definitely enjoys the attention and always drops hints about what a bad boy he is. Late one night, on a school night, I pulled into a convenience store parking lot to pick up a few things and notice his car there. They walk out of the store together and get back in the car with ice cream. He picked her up from school and bought her ice cream, and they were just sitting in his car being adorable and sweet. When I got out of my car to go to the store, I could hear that they were listening to show tunes. Best part, we ended up driving out of the parking lot at the same time, and the guy spotted me and gave me the friendliest hi ever. Don't judge a book by the cover, I suppose, but it's kind of worrying when kids in high school are dating people who are significantly older and not even in education anymore. I mean, heck, I remember one guy who got absolutely roasted when he was in year 11 because he was dating a year 7. So that's like, an 11 to 12-year-old dating a 16-year-old, which is definitely sketchy. Middle school teacher in a pretty rough school here. I know about their parents, illegal substances, unemployment or legal problems from data our school is given, and from the parents outright telling me during phone calls or meetings. It's crazy and kind of trustworthy what the parents offer up to me. I've had them tell me, and the school counselor too, that so-and-so cousin was murdered in front of them last week, that's why they've been gone, or there's a lot of kids being bad touched. One kid I recall finally had enough and pulled a gun on his dad, after being molested for probably years. It's hard to get them to work diligently after that. I also can't tell certain kids that their moms, who probably are just a few years older than me, made a pass at me before they knew I wasn't single. I'm a swim instructor and I know if my students play the piano. How? Well, they swim their front crawl with piano hands until I correct them. What are piano hands? Piano hands are when the index, middle, and ring fingers are together but the thumb and pinky are extended outward. A good habit for someone who might need to hit a high or low note. I also have a psych degree, and my understanding for why this happens is due to interference from similar neural substrates in the cerebellum. I also have had a student with flute hands, and my boss has hockey hands. You should see the look on my students' face when I tell them I know they play the piano. They think I'm psychic. I used to work as a substitute. I learned more than I ever wanted to about the kids I taught. More often than not, I wanted to switch from whatever lecture I was on to one about the concept of plausible deniability. You want to talk to your buddy about how much devil's lettuce you smoked and how many loose women you got with? Great, do it somewhere else. I'm required to inform security and the office about that stuff. Yes, I will still do it even if your cousin is a gangster and will pop a cap in me. Kids in juvenile detention schools just have no sense of plausible deniability. We'll call him Ted. We had a food drive last semester before Thanksgiving for about 2 months. We made a huge basket of canned food, things to make pies, stuffing, sides, bought a turkey, and as a staff voted for what students' family needed it the most. We all agreed that Ted's family, without question, needed it the most. A teacher had to pay for his uniform early on in the year. So he was told close to Thanksgiving by administration that someone would be delivering a basket to his house that afternoon. I guess he was overwhelmed and didn't ask questions then, because he came to my class and asked me, "Is that the food we've been raising for poor people?" I didn't know what to say. I said, "Some of it." "So was it a random thing that I'm getting the basket?" I knew what he was asking, so I said, "Oh my goodness, you won?" He acted surprised. I said, "Man, I'm jealous. They put a basket together with the food left over they didn't donate and picked one person from our program in a drawing and you must have won it." He was totally pumped. Before my class was over, I went to his next 4 classes and told the teachers to play along with the raffle story. They did. He doesn't know. Still a little annoyed that the admin told him. I feel like it could have been a left at the front door sort of thing. I love food drives and little stories like this. It really does warm my heart. The amount of crap I overhear is ridiculous. I know which of my students hosts all the parties and who made out and or hooked up with whom at said parties. I know who does the illegal substances. I know who does the illegal substances and doesn't think that the teachers know they do the illegal substances. I know that one of my students gives crappy BJs to a student in another one of my classes. I know who cheats on everything. Sometimes it's the goody two-shoes kid. I know that at least 3 students have agreed that they would totally tap that, meaning me. They think I'm oblivious. I have excellent hearing. Being a teacher, it would be really uncomfortable if students were just talking about what they'd want to do with you like that a lot. That would be really like, woof. I was a TA to the same teacher for 4 years in high school. I was really uptight at the time and asked her why she didn't mind when the same dude left class every single day with the pass for at least 20 minutes. My teacher said it was because he was making out with his girlfriend in the stairwell closet, and so help her God if I interrupted them because she was the best he was ever going to get. Teachers know your stuff, man. That teacher's a real one. Such a good wingman. I'm not currently teaching, but when I was a student teacher, what I was surprised to find out right away, and all you who are still in high school should know this, is how easy it is to tell when you're being lied to. I mean, teenagers are terrible at lying. I absolutely knew when I was being lied to. But here's the thing, kids. If they don't call you out on your lie, it's not because you succeeded in being convincing, it's because you're probably the 50th person that day to do so, and it's seriously just not worth the effort over something small. This one girl would ask to go to the bathroom almost every day to see her boyfriend who had a different lunch than she did. She'd usually be gone only 5 or 10 minutes, so I frequently let her do so. I used to do exactly the same thing in school, so I know how it is. She did her work, so she earned my discretion on that case. Pro tip, if you give, you get. Put in the effort and you will have bargaining chips. Also, I just want you guys who are still in school to know this. Your teachers know how to keep a professional distance, but they are not robots, and they are not blind. They see what's going on with you, and they care. I cried at least once a week over my students. I only taught for a short time, and now, 2 years later, I remember all my students' names, would recognize them on sight, and remember who made me cry. Oh no, not that tactic. I always hate it when people don't yell at you for doing something wrong, but they're just I'm disappointed. And it's no, don't do this to me. That they're in gangs and which gangs they're in. Really, you asked to borrow a pen, but you don't want to write with the one I give you because it's blue? You can't sit in a blue chair, but you're not in a gang? Nah. It's actually really sad. I've only been teaching for 5.5 years, and 2 of my former students have already been killed in gang-related violence. Middle school ESL teacher here. For the first month, I didn't tell my students I spoke Spanish. I'm white. In that month, I heard more about my butt than I ever wanted to know. Also some gossip, love lives, hate for school, the usual. How did my students not know that I speak Spanish if I'm an ESL teacher? The majority of ESL teachers, i.e. American teachers in China, Japan, or other Asian countries, do not know the native language. The accepted practice for ESL instruction is called English immersion. It basically means that all class time will be in the desired second language, in this case, English. ESL teachers use instructional methods such as TPR, fancy way of saying hand motions and body language, and other such methods to help level 1 students learn the basics. You'd be surprised how much you can learn by just pointing to things and saying the English word for it. How did I finally tell them? I did a class at the end of the month on the differences between English and Spanish. In Spanish, I just acted like nothing was different, asking questions in Spanish and instructing in Spanish. A more glorious feeling would be hard to find. How did they react? Jaws dropped, chaos sort of ensued. Several students asked me if I spoke Spanish. I said in Spanish something like, "How could I speak Spanish? I'm a gringa." 2 students apologized after class for saying inappropriate things in class, and one particular vocal student ran out of the room and allegedly tossed his cookies in the bathroom. Hilarity ensued. Needless to say, I now have a great relationship with my students, and they know not to mess around when I'm in the room. I'm a high school teacher and have a class Twitter that my students can follow for homework updates, links to presentations, quizzes, etc. I told my students, don't ask me to follow you on Twitter because I won't. Not only do I not have the time to read your tweets, there are some things I just do not want to know. Your personal lives are one of them. I lied. After about 40 students followed, I went and snooped on every single one of their profiles and read all of their tweets. So much regret. So much. So what you're saying is you're a liar. One thing I know for sure is when my students are high. I've smoked quite a bit back in the day and therefore know all the symptoms and lingo. I totally mess around with them when they are stoned, not only because it is hilarious, but also in hopes to discourage them from smoking before coming to school. If I know it becomes a problem with any of them, then I will have the serious discussion about how you may not remember what you and your buddies talked about all those times when you were high, but you will sure as hell remember whether or not you passed my class. But for the most part, the stoners don't come to class too often and wait until after school. Teachers have huge amounts of access to students' information. We gossip more than students do. We know everything. Who hooked up with who on camp, the weekend, in the holidays. We know about makeups, breakups, and everything in between. We know who smokes. We know who is doing the illegal substances and who is getting up to mischief. We know kids' asexual and gender orientation, sometimes before they do. It's mostly just from listening in class. Kids seem to think that teachers can't hear personal conversations or that we don't pay any mind to them. We do. Working at a high school is like living on the set of a soap opera. I still can't believe how devastated I was when my favorite couple of 2012 broke up. It was torturous. You know what? I get it. You've probably not got much going on. You're just doing your work. And it's like, all the little bits of drama and whatever you hear is just a little bit of entertainment in the day to get you through work and keep you occupied, I guess. My boyfriend is an elementary school teacher and he says that he knows way more about students' personal lives than they think. Like their parents tell them their problems with poverty, immigration and stuff. Meanwhile, some of the kids are like, I went to Cabo for summer break, or parents' private jet, and he's just like, awesome. Why don't you write a journal entry about it? As a student, I was close with the student teacher at the time. I liked a boy and he told me not to go for him because he had gotten in trouble before with child smut and illegal substances. No idea how he knew that. That does sound like the kind of thing that people would need to be notified about. I mean, I know someone who actually worked in care and they had to, they were offered the job job to escort someone who had at one point molested a child, and because they were special needs, they needed someone to go with them to college. And this person in question, who I know, after being informed about what the dirty diddler did, they outright refused to do the job. I'm pretty sure something as severe as anything to do with children, a crime like that is going to be told to anyone that has to deal with them on a regular basis in a professional manner. When I teach undergrads, it's painfully obvious which ones are dating each other, even if it's a secret. I recently taught a required course for freshmen, and one of my students would give me outlandish excuses for not having been in class. He had a breakup, 2 dead relatives, and was flown across the world to save his family business, all in one semester. Oddly enough, his work was pretty good. I had to sit him down and explain that I really didn't care where he had been as long as he was showing up to reviews with completed projects, and that a long-winded explanation was unnecessary. The look on this teenager's face when I told him, "I'm going to be out today," was perfectly reasonable, priceless. As for when I'm teaching graduate students, I definitely do know hardly any of you little buggers have read the material beyond a thesis statement, unless you're PhD students sitting in on a master's level seminar, and in that case, I do know that you love the sound of your own voice more than Frank Reynolds loved rum ham. So shut up, you're ruining the class for the people who actually need it. Inner city middle school teacher here. I know everything my students gossip about during class. No, not because I have supersonic teacher ears, as many of my students suspect. No, not because that smoke detector in the corner is actually a camera, as I convinced them of earlier this year. It's because kids can't whisper worth a damn. Also, privacy settings. Seriously, kids, use them. Not to mention, those kids I had in class 2 years ago who come by my classroom to visit and make small talk every day after school. Yeah, they keep me more in the loop than most of the students. Sometimes it pays to be the cool teacher. But how sad it is when the cool teacher eventually grows up or gets promoted and then becomes the regular teacher. I understand your jokes, I just pretend that I don't. When I was a student, I would marvel at how my teachers could fail to understand the brilliant asexual innuendo I would use that would have my classmates snickering while they, the instructor, looked on without comprehending. Now I hear 18-year-old girls in my class make the same kinds of comments, and as a 36-year-old dude, my brain immediately begins flashing warning lights and sirens. So I play really dumb because I'm just not going to go there. And that is probably, honestly, for the best. High school teacher here. Regarding students' personal lives, it's very much a need-to-know basis. I don't really give a damn that you party on the weekends, get high after school with your buddies, or anything like that. The thing is that as teachers, we are mandated reporters for a lot of things. The less you know about stuff like that, the better. No teacher snoops Facebook for this very reason. If I see a student ripping a bong on their profile picture, I have to do something about it. That and perusing Facebooks of 14 to 18-year-olds is creepy as hell. What I do know is the stuff I think is necessary. Which students come from disadvantaged backgrounds, who comes from a 2-parent home, behavior and academic histories. The last thing you want to do is call home. A woman answers the phone and you assume it's a kid's mom when it's their sister who doubles as their primary caretaker. You don't want to tell kids that they should go on the school field trip and they come from a very low income home. A lot of kids probably assume teachers don't know stuff like this, but most of us go out of our way to make sure they do. I also know which teacher's classes you're a butthole in. You don't really want to say anything about that to the kid either, because frankly, some teachers are buttholes and they have it coming. What did you totally misunderstand as a kid? When I was a child, we would go on a plane every time we'd visit Mexico, so I assumed Mexico was actually located in the sky. What? I used to believe that when you turned off the TV it would pause, was really upset when I would come back from dinner and my show would be over. That's so cute. I thought it was Pizza Hot, not Pizza Hut, until I was about 16 years old. I feel like such a douchebag laughing at these. Okay, I'll do one myself. When I was a really young boy, I didn't think we lived in England. I thought we lived in America because of all the American television I would watch, because I was a dumb butt. I would literally insist to my family, no, we live in America. We have dollars. I don't know why. I just didn't want to believe them. Oh, this one's going to be fun. SX. I had a massive misunderstanding of SX that could have severely injured my adult life had it not been corrected. When I was younger, I was obsessed with biology and animals, so I knew how everything fit together, But those damn Hollywood movies messed up my perception of how humans actually did the horizontal limbo. In movies, couples get all hot and heavy. The screen fades to black and they wake up naked together. I guess I filled in the blanks with my 7-year-old brain and thought that after you got aroused, you just fell asleep naked together. And the penis just sort of autopiloted itself over to the vagina, threw up and snaked back. So when people said they were sleeping together, I took this literally. Made for an awkward encounter with my dad when I was 12, when I suggested he just go to sleep with pants on instead of getting a vasectomy. I thought that when you grew up, you got a special card that allowed you to go to the bank and have some money printed when you needed some at the ATM. And when I heard about guerrilla warfare on TV, I thought it meant that there was an army of really angry gorillas in other countries starting wars. I used to think that kidnapping was kids taking naps. I was very surprised as a kid to find out babies weren't pooped out and women had more than one hole. That if you got shot anywhere on your body, you would automatically die. I thought you had to marry someone who was born on exactly the same day as you were. I thought that God punished bad people and rewarded good people. Boy, was I wrong. When my parents used to talk about how things were black and white when we were watching TV, I thought they were talking about the whole world was black and white and wanted to know how everything was colored to what it is now. I had pictures of people painting grass in my head and thought this was the way the world was now colored. That'd be really trippy. One day you're like walking along and you see some grass that's just freshly grown in and it's all black and white, and then some people in a black van come in with a paintbrush and bucket and like paint over it, and they look at you and they're like, shh. The concept of race. In the 2nd grade, there was this little poetry contest, and the prompt was to write about the human race. I wrote about a bunch of people running. You know what? I think we'd all be better off if we just thought like this young man once did. I thought the actors actually died when they died in movies. Okay, no, I get that one. I totally get that. I mean, I remember being such a little dummy. I remember liking Star Wars, loving Obi-Wan Kenobi, and when my mom told me, oh, Obi-Wan Kenobi is the old man as well, you know, I'm like, no, he's not. Obi-Wan Kenobi's young and cool. I think really I didn't want to believe that he then turned into an old man and died. When 9/11 happened, I thought that the reason my morning cartoons weren't showing was because a plane had crashed into the building that made the cartoons. I thought the island Martha's Vineyard was owned by Martha Stewart. When I was about 9, Nickelodeon advertised a Nick Takes Over Your School contest. The commercial was filled with kids playing games, teachers getting slimed, etc. I was terrified that my school might win. Nick would take over for a full school year and that everyone would get held back a year since there didn't appear to be any learning going on in the commercials. The Civil War. Little kid version of me couldn't understand why America was fighting over forks, knives, and spoons. What do they mean by that? Like, does anyone have an explanation for that? Please do say. I thought the car somehow knew whether we would turn left or right. I was amazed by those turn signals. Why Walt Disney wrote his last name with a backwards G. It does totally look like it says Gisney. Or would it be Gisney? That $20 was a lot of money. I thought firemen burned down buildings. This was because when I was 5 or so, our neighbors sold or donated their house to the fire department to help trainees. So every day for like a week, the fire department showed up and lit the house on fire. I guess I somehow missed the part where they then put the fire out. So for years, I was scared of firemen and thought they set houses on fire. It didn't come out until sometime later my parents gave me the whole, if anything bad happens, call the fire department talk. When I was young, I knew people did things on purpose when they meant to do them. I thought the word was unpurpose, though, and so naturally the opposite of unpurpose was purpose. Once in 1st grade, I was sent to the principal and I kept insisting that I had committed said offense purposely. I thought Harry Potter was about bunny rabbits because Beatrix Potter wrote Peter Rabbit. So by the laws of word association, it was a series of books about little rabbits going on adventures with their friends. Ah, the word association game is a boy. Yes, I'm familiar with it. I remember not knowing that all the Final Fantasy games were set in different universes up to a point, except for when they decided that it was going to be a sequel, whatever. And I just assumed that any blonde main character that I saw was like Cloud with a different haircut because Cloud was the first protagonist I knew about in the franchise. I used to think people died on their birthday because the headstones I had seen didn't have months and days, just how many years. There were 2 boys in my pre-K class named Juan and Raj. I called them
Room 1 and garage instead. No wonder they never shared their toys with me. I thought there was a government agency called the Management for Your Protection because toilet seat cover dispensers always said, provided by the management for your protection. Whenever I was in the car with my parents while stuck in a traffic jam, I would wonder why the person first in line was going so slow. If only that jerk sped up, we would all move faster. Oh, I've been there. I was convinced that white dog poop in the backyard was dinosaur fossils, and I believed that my dad fought a guy in a boxing ring to win my mom. I was staying at my friend's house for the day once and had one of those annoying sneezes that just don't come out no matter how hard you try. I told my friend about it and he told me that if I had a sneeze stuck and I couldn't get it out that I could die. Of course this screwed with my 8-year-old brain pretty hard. Never did die. I didn't know the difference between the words grape and rake and used them interchangeably. I'm not talking about actual grapes. I don't know if that translates well because of the census. At around 10, I started changing my new little brother's diapers. My little brother was circumcised, so whatever. Being a 10-year-old little girl, I don't see much penis. One day, I changed my little cousin's diaper, and I'm totally concerned with the way his junk looks, only to find out years later that he was uncircumcised. I used to think cancer was when your eyes got swirly things in them and your head spun around endlessly. No clue where that idea came from. When I was little, I would hear commercials advertising things for just $5.99. I used to think they meant $5.99. I would tell my parents that I wanted to buy it because I had enough money, and they were always pretty amused. Like everything. One thing I can remember is that I thought the USA national anthem went like, "By the dawn's early light," instead of "By the dawn's early light," as though dawn's early was just another one of those many words I was familiar with as a kid. I thought it was maybe an adjective, like the orange glow of the morning sun cast a dawn's-early mood over the park. I also thought as a very young kid that when you were fired from your job, the company killed you. I also thought dawn's-early was a word because I thought that's how they said it in the American national anthem. Once again, only knowing the American national anthem because I watched so many TV episodes from American shows like The Simpsons. My parents used to take me on vacation when I was younger, and we'd leave out of Newark, New Jersey airport. When taking off, you can see Bayonne, New Jersey, and it's all docks and cranes and ships. One time, I pointed out the window to the cranes and asked my father what that place was. He said, Bayonne, and until I was about 18 years old, I thought no person lived there, only worked there. I imagined it was just cranes and ships and docks. There was an infomercial for some kind of griddle. All I remember was people tapping a frozen hamburger patty or frozen chicken breast on the griddle, and it swipes to the next shot of the food fully thawed and cooking. I thought you had to tap the food on the griddle to turn it on. Oh no, Sonny, that's just a fun editing trick someone decided to do. When I was a kid, I had a book. In this book, a character moves to a new town. To do this, the family has the house lifted up and placed on the back of a truck and driven to an empty piece of land in the new town. I was convinced that this is what happened whenever anyone moved. What really got me was that other than this, the book was really plain and normal. See Jim run type stuff. It wasn't some kind of fantasy book or anything. We moved from a decent house with no yard to a trailer with a nicely sized yard. I was confused but thought it was just taking a long time for our house to arrive? No, we just had to actually live in the trailer. Biracial babies. I thought they would come out swirled. I don't know if this is controversial to say, but that sounds cool. Why my parents, when together, ever needed privacy. I thought I was supposed to sprout a second penis to match my two balls. I don't know if anyone remembers the kids' voices that answered the questions that Steve asked on Blue's Clues. Well, I thought those were just other kids that were watching the show at the same time, like there was some kind of microphone on the TV that would pick up my voice, and other kids watching would hear. So I used to whisper dirty words into my TV real quiet with my hands cupped around my mouth so my mom wouldn't hear, but the other kids watching would. I thought the lyrics to Dirty Deeds Done Dirt Cheap by AC/DC were Dirty Deeds and the Thunder Chief. You know what, I'm pretty sure that I also grossly misheard that song and thought it said something else as well. I overheard my mom and dad talking about having to fire someone. I thought it meant they were going to set him on fire. The fact that they were upset and serious about it added to the illusion. I thought I must have two stomachs, one for food and one for drinks. How else would the food know to come out one hole and the drinks out another?
When I was 5 in 1996, I thought for some reason that 1997 was 1,000 years in the future. So one day, my parents were watching local news, and there was a story on a golf course that would be completed in 97. And my thought was, you idiots will all be long dead by then. Why does a golf course matter? When I was a kid and my mom didn't want me to watch something on TV, she would tell me that it was a scary show or scary movie. Well, I somehow got it in my head that the 2001 Planet of the Apes film was the single most terrifying movie ever made. I didn't see it until I was about 11 or 12 and then understood my mom's parenting techniques. I mean, good lord, I would not want to have to live through the ape-human war. God, that would be terrifying, horrible. Why women's bodies didn't return to the former state immediately after giving birth. I told my mom she was still fat as we were leaving the hospital after she had my sister. Damn, kid. Harsh. My boyfriend told me this. Backstory. He was raised by a single mom and had 2 siblings. So my boyfriend overheard a conversation with his mom and babysitter. Apparently, they had a mutual friend who had a few kids. His mom sarcastically says, if she shakes hands with a guy, she'll get pregnant. Being a child, my boyfriend was obviously horrified. It took his mom a long while to figure out why he wouldn't shake hands when meeting people. My cousin had a chore chart of different categories like bedroom, bathroom, etc. The last category was labeled miscellaneous, and I always thought she had a neighbor that she did chores for and her name was Miss Alanius. Childbirth. I thought my dad would be able to have babies. They still have a good chuckle every time they tell that story. Marriage. I thought you had to find someone with the same last name to get married. It didn't help my parents didn't correct me on it. More so because they have different last names and were common law married until it was abolished a few years ago. I figured my parents were rebels. It's not the weirdest assumption kids have made about what constitutes getting married or how you get married, I guess. Autism. I always thought autism was like a license to drive cars. Autoism. I believe that you had to get diagnosed with autism by a doctor so that you were fit to drive. Makes sense, right? On television, informative autism commercials would constantly air and there would be a test crash dummy impacting a car. I thought that if you didn't have autism, you wouldn't be able to drive and you would get into an accident and turn into a crash test dummy. It all made sense a few years ago. I still don't have my license. I was 17 when I learned my favorite animal, the jackalope, wasn't real. I totally get that. It is mundane enough, it is plausible enough that it's like, yeah, that could be real. I think I might have been around the same age or older. I was 50-50 for a while though. I remember saying to my friend, hey, a jackalope's real? And he even looked at me and was like, I don't think they are they? And we both looked it up on the internet. And so, yeah, rabbit with antlers, it's plausible. I get it. I have a couple that I have my parents to blame for. They made me think that you can unlock the car by voice command and always got me to shout, unlock, as they would unlock it with their remote. Sadly, this went on for much longer than it should have. Second, when I would be at my mom's work, she would tell me to cover my eyes completely with my hands while she made photocopies of any documents because she said I would go blind. I think I was between 5 and 8 years old. They make fun of me from time to time, but I apparently had no reason to not trust my parents. Back when I was a little one, about 4 or 6 years old, I was forced to go to Sunday school. During our Sunday school sessions, we would all sit around a large lady talking about Jesus and all of his crazy antics. I wasn't much for listening, but knew I should probably get some key facts in case I am asked what I learnt in Sunday school. This particular session, we were learning about Adam and Eve. To summarize the tale, there is an apple which caused bad things to happen when you eat it, and 2 naked people. Anyway, fast forward to the next weekend where our family is hosting a family get-together. South American families have a lot of relatives. As my mother is showing people around our yard, she plucks out an apple. I smack it out of her hand and proceed to explain why she couldn't eat the apple. I had gotten the notion that somehow Adam and Eve became naked by eating the apple, and there was no way in hell I wanted to see my mother naked. Anyway, to this day, I can't eat apples in peace around my family without some sort of wisecrack. You should have paid better attention. It kind of reminds me, though, of how one time me and my friend got through a class where we were learning about the book Great Expectations, where we didn't actually read the book, but instead we referenced the episode of South Park where they did Great Expectations by subtracting and deducing what was too crude to be legitimate for the original work, and we actually got through the class really well. My dad was such a terrible highway driver that when we went on our annual vacation, he inevitably got into a car accident, usually a minor fender bender. I thought that every trip needed to include an accident and would pester him while on the
the road. When's the accident going to happen? When's it going to happen?
What is wrong with you? I'm just picturing like the insurance agent, the police, every year on that day, on that annual trip, it's like, well, it's gonna happen inevitably. This guy's gonna call up or whatever, or someone's gonna call up about them, and the police are like, he's coming. I know he is. He's never let me down. Thought drinking and driving referred to any type of beverage, so when my uncle took a Coke for the road, I was shocked. I'd always heard that you could only survive a couple days without drinking water. Well, I stayed with my southern grandparents for likely 2 weeks. During that time, I drank nothing but iced tea. I was really worried I was going to die soon. I thought Albert Einstein created and gave life to a monster called Frank Einstein, and that's why he was considered a genius. I thought when you moved somewhere, you had to find a person in that town who needed to move to your town and then swap homes with them. When people said, I'm serving so my kids don't have to, I assumed that meant your kids were forced into the military if you didn't do it? Kids are literal. That'd be a terrifying prospect for certain. I didn't realize John Lennon was a different person than Lenin, the Soviet premier, as the names are pronounced almost the same and both had a huge impact in the 20th century. The world made a lot more sense once that one got cleared up. Before I ever had the talk, I inferred that babies were in fact made when two people kiss and their germs mix. I wasn't that far off. I didn't understand the TV shows were recorded, so when I saw the actors jumping in age from young to old and vice versa in the span of a week, I thought it was some type of wizardry. I'm surprised I haven't seen one saying, I thought the cartoons were like in or behind the TV and I just had to like catch them when they're off guard or something. I was raised very Catholic. For some reason, I thought a person's torso was called their body, so when I learned that when people die, their bodies stayed on earth while the rest of them went to heaven, I thought upon death a person's head, arms, and legs flew off and went into the sky. I also thought people had funerals for torsos. It was pretty metal. What a charming mind you must have. I mean that legitimately, by the way. I thought for a very long, almost too long time that an only child was pronounced lonely child because they had no siblings. When I was in pre-K, I was walking down the hall to recess, just chilling out with one of my friends when I saw one of those handprints made out of paper with a student's name on it. You know, the ones you have all your kids make and then you put them on your door. Anyways, the name on this one was Jesus. Hey, look, Jose, there's a kid named Jesus. It's Jesus. I've read my children's Bible 5 times. I think I know how to say Jesus. No, it's a Mexican name. You just say the J like H, like with my name. Jose does not have a J. I know how to spell my name, man. And I know how to spell Jesus. We fought about it for at least 5 minutes. I was not a fun kid. I thought everyone lived to the exact same age, like my brother taunted me for being 3 years younger than him, but in my mind it was no sweat because I was going to be alive for 3 more years after he died. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's also a thought that passed through my mind at one point or another. At least it sounds weirdly familiar to me. I misunderstood cardinal directions. I thought north was always in front of me. I misunderstood my family taking me to see the circus. I thought all the animals and people were there to see me. I misunderstood cashiers. I thought they had all that money and items. I misunderstood SX, despite learning about it from a book that was supposed to scientifically show it in the way kids understand. I thought a giant sperm climbs up the woman's leg as the couple holds hands. Certainly, if that were the way that it went, I don't think anyone would be interested in doing the deed. People just said, he died for your sins, over and never explained what that meant, as if it was obvious. It's not. But I wasn't born yet. He died for your sins. As punishment for my sins? Or he died for your sins? For me or for the sins? He died for your sins. So does that mean it's okay to sin? He died for your sins. So am I forgiven or he died for your sins? Please explain that phrase, Mom. Until Jesus died, sins could not be forgiven. Because of the ritual sacrifice, sins can now be forgiven. This may or may not apply to people who sinned before his death. Why didn't God just say, okay, I forgive sins now? Jesus died! Sorry! When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories. And if you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot. Linked in the description below.